What's that?
Already at your...
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, it's 5 o'clock and we do have a quorum. So we're going to go ahead and call this Santa Clara City Council work meeting to order. I'm Mayor Rick Rosenberg. We have present from the council, Councilman Ben Shakespeare, Councilwoman Lena Mathis, Councilman Jarrett Waite, and Councilman Denny Drake. We'll excuse Councilman Gubler tonight, who is up north, I think, with family. And so I'd like to welcome everybody who's here. Appreciate you being here, especially the staff and Roger. And so we're going to go ahead and jump right into the, in fact, let me ask before we jump into the agenda, Roger, what's your time frame? Do you want me to adjust the agenda and move you up? You're dead last right now.
I'm fine being last. We actually have Laura Lewis coming to talk more on the financial side, and she's running a little late. So
okay.
We're happy to be on the end of the agenda.
No worries.
Whenever you want me.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, let's jump into the working agenda, council. Item 2A is code enforcement discussion. Chief Flowers, good to see you.
Good to be here. About several years ago, actually, we talked about code enforcement in the city of Santa Clara. And I had made a recommendation that we kind of look at maybe a law enforcement role in that. And Brock came to me, well, I guess it's been a month ago, about then or so, and talked about the code enforcement program. And I said, hey, you know, we've got a role there, and I think it would be good if that role was handed over to law enforcement. Now, a lot of people go, ooh, code enforcement, law enforcement. That may not be something we want to do, but I think it's really good. A lot of cities are doing that for safety measures. But and I talked a lot with Scott and Brock, and we talked a little bit about maybe a different kind of approach, more of a problem solving. I think it's a good way for community outreach because we have some issues that are long term, and you're not going to go in and deal with them with a citation. And so we're looking for a little direction on what you want to see there. But, you know, I think it's one where like we can deal with things like chronic garbage problems, chronic business problems, chronic alarm problems, some traffic issues where this can kind of combine into a law enforcement role, reporting back to the city council, what we do and how we're approaching it. It's very good. Things like ongoing neighbor disputes. We have several of those that seem to be ongoing. So in my presentation to Brock, I just mentioned that we would, my thought is to take a pretty soft approach, more of a problem solving approach, but be willing to issue a citation when required and be willing to follow those through on some of those folks that just will not comply with city ordinances and city codes. So that's sort of where we're going. Then and there's a second caveat. This was a part-time position. So we approached the city of Ivins with the same thing. I know that they had an opening in their code area and they're having a hard time filling that. So I recommended we take those two part-time positions and make one full-time for both cities. And both city managers agreed. And we have started moving on that. And we have asked Sergeant Briggs to fill that role for now, build the program up and see where we want to go, visiting with the city managers and councils and staying in contact with those, because, you know, these can become problematic for you all. You'll start receiving the letters and things like that. And we would just like to take it on a holistic approach. West Valley and other cities have actually turned this over to law enforcement, like I said, several years ago, because of the safety issues that get involved. So, and that's kind of my report on that. Here to just let you know we're there. We've only been in it about a week. And we're moving forward with it. And we're actually putting the manual and the codes and our approaches and developing some of our problems, which we will report to Brock and look for direction there. So we like it a lot.
Great. Questions for Bob?
Actually, I had a couple, but one you answered. I just was going to ask if we're putting this together with Ivins, kind of combining those, and you've answered that. What are the biggest code enforcement issues we have? Maybe.
Okay.
What are you seeing out there?
We're seeing a lot of code enforcement issues involving trailers. You know, people parking their cars on streets and working on them, repairing the engines, commercial vehicles in some cases. You know, just those kinds of things that are kind of more of an annoyance, but they're ongoing. They seem to be ongoing in the same areas. So we'll go in, we'll do some enforcement, and then we'll back away. And then a month later, you're back with the same problems. I'll give you an example of one here in Santa Clara that noise. We have a problem with some of our delivery places delivering at 2 or 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. And every time they back up, their trucks are, you know, making those noises, and they make their deliveries every Wednesday morning at 4 o'clock, and it wakes up the neighbors. That has to be dealt with. That's just inconsiderate. So those are the kinds of things that I think we need to follow up. And then the citizens actually have somebody they can call. They don't have to call the city and get, you know, they can, on these ongoing things, they'll have an officer, they know who to call. And so right now, it's kind of those. I don't know, Cody, if you can speak to the problems that you saw and are seeing. We're going to actually work really closely with our building officials on that and back them up. They'll see a lot of things that we can team up. It'd be a really nice team effort. That's a long answer to your short question, but that's what we're seeing.
I think it's great. I think parking and that, I've wondered if we shouldn't be proactive in our newsletter and that, and just the why behind it. Hey, if we can, obviously people have the right to park their cars there, but if they've got room off the street, it's just a safer neighborhood all the way through. And just, this is why we'd like it. We've got schools, we've got kids, we've got pedestrians, and anytime you can get that. So yeah,
we get some calls from neighbors that would like to be anonymous because they don't want the trouble. They don't want to be seen as that neighbor, but there are some fairly what I would consider inconsiderate neighbors that we'll work on that route. But I think it's a really nice approach.
Any other questions, council?
Are they uniformed? Is it a uniformed officer?
Yes. We're actually talking about that. I talked to Sergeant Riggs about that, and he says, you know, I like the uniform, but maybe we can look at something that's not so tactical. And so I think the police identifiers need to be there, but maybe not full blown on street officer. You know, we're actually looking at that.
Okay.
Any recommendations that you'd like to see there? I mean, we're really forming it up, and we want to give you what you want.
My opinion is if they show up in a full standard uniform, you automatically put people on the defensive.
Yes.
And it can escalate emotions very quickly, even for something as simple as parking in the street.
Yeah, we agree with you. That's why we're thinking maybe a shirt that has an identifier on it, but more words, less badge, that kind of thing. We're talking about marked, unmarked car, which vehicle, those kinds of things. But I'm in agreement with you. I think a uniform is a little overkill for it.
Yeah, and I can kind of back it up with an anecdote. In my first election, I put up a sign in Ivans, not realizing it was in Ivans, and I had 2 police officers show up at my house with the sign, and it was pretty jarring to have police officers show up at my house over a sign. And so I can see where Lane is coming from for sure. That does kind of put up an affront all of a sudden.
That's interesting because, you know, during the elections, I probably received a dozen phone calls about signs and sign locations and size and that sort of thing. We just chose to kind of let it go for a couple of weeks, and we'll worry about it sometime in the future. So.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We'll report back to you how it goes.
Sounds good. Thank you. Item A2, amendment to the Santa Clara City Code, Chapter 17.28, requirements for walls and fences discussion. Jim? Cody?
Thanks, Mayor. So this item tonight is just meant to be a discussion item, and we wanted to talk to you about Chapter 1728, and like you said, requirements for walls and fencing. And I think we'd have some pictures. The 2 amigos, Cody and I went out. I'm probably embarrassing. We went out and took some pictures yesterday. He actually got the board and cut it to 9 feet in height. The lines, the white markings mean nothing. Just so you know, they're not a measurement of height or anything. But what we want to do is, it's our goal, and we've been tasked to look at this, and we've been working together for a few weeks now. We're looking to create an ordinance which allows for clear and consistent standards, as well as review by city staff for wall and fence permits. So it's clear to the applicant, it's clear to staff, and it's just consistent. And the slides are just to get the conversation going. So really, it's just a discussion item. The first one here, not a big story to the first slide. Down the road here off of Vineyard and down a road. I was looking on the map today. I couldn't think of the name of the road. Our map didn't show it. We're just trying to show you that wall in a residential area, single family, is an 8-foot wall. So that is an 8-foot wall on that side of the home. Just giving you an idea of what that looks like. Let's go to the next slide. Let's go one more down and then we'll come back to that one. So this slide, I apologize for the chubby guy in the picture. I really didn't want to be in the pictures, but one of us had to hold the board. Yeah, I don't think so. There's another picture later that will show how unphotogenic I am. But this is kind of funny. Anyways, it's a picture. So we're in the hills of Santa Clara on this slide, off of Boomers, and it's a picture of a 7-foot retaining wall. So that's just block concrete. It almost looks like a Utah barricade type of concrete, but they're just blocks. And then you've got a 6-foot wall up above. And so that situation, you're looking at a total of 13 feet. So that's pretty high. And it gains more height as it goes down the road, down Boomers. So if you go up towards the home and the circle, it's probably more in the 10 to 11 foot range. But with the grade in the road, the wall is exceeding in height as well and goes higher. Let's go back to that previous slide. This is at the back of that home, and that home that's kind of down below. And I don't know what to call this. It's just a confluence of walls. If you look at this, you see the block, that wall that's kind of acting as a retaining wall. You see the block fence above, but then you see all the, you see other fences as you go down the line. And this is quite high too. And, one of the things that should be done, and Cody and I have been talking about this, is creating terraces and landings. So if you go up 6 feet, then you have a landing of 6 feet for landscaping, and then you go up another 6 feet to kind of break that up. This is probably not a very good example. It's not our intent to go after any person or any names or this is bad, good, bad, and ugly. We're just giving you some examples. Let's go down to the next one. And this is in the Sycamore area. Sycamores, is that right?
Roan.
Is it in Roan? Okay, I'm sorry. I should know that because that's where Councilmember Shakespeare lives. We went around your corner.
That's
drove
actually,
down to this
that's my
street.
house, isn't it?
No, we did not take pictures of your house. We didn't do that.
No, I didn't have.
So this is an example. We wanted to show you this, and I think Cody did a good job taking the pictures here of a fence where you have a high side and a low side. So to the left, you see a lot that's higher in grade, and that wall is approximately 6 feet tall on the high lot, the lot to the left. Now, if we go to the next slide, this is showing kind of the shared wall, and you can see the high side and the low side. And then if you go one more slide, Brock, this is that high side, or lower side. So this lot has a lower grade, and you can see this side of the wall is 9 feet in height. The other side of the wall is 6 feet in height, because the grade of that lot is higher, and that's still allowing for 6 feet of privacy fencing for that future homeowner or property owner there. The other neighbor gets more privacy and more wall height. But Cody, did you have a comment on this one? What are your thoughts?
Just wanted to add that there's currently some language, and we're working on cleaning it up, where there is a difference in lot elevations as to when the retaining wall needs engineering, how much retainer you can have when you marry these two, the fence block and the retainer. So there is some current language in the ordinance, and we're cleaning it up and adding some more options to it as property owners. So you'll see more of this. It'll be open for more discussion in the future.
So specific to that, right now you can go to 9 feet. That's our maximum, correct?
Yes, currently you can have a shared wall with property owner consent because it gets obtrusive with 9 feet. Some people don't mind it, some people do. Probably depending on what view sheds they're susceptible to. But yeah, right, currently you can go 3 feet of retainer and 6 feet of fence block.
But you can go higher than that with consent of the planning commission.
Correct. In the current code, if it exceeds 9 feet, you go to planning commission if it's greater than that. So, new home, new fence, this looks to be a pretty good example of a wall that was well done. And you can see the difference in grade. This example is a classic example of what we get and what we're dealing with, where one side is high and the other side is low because of the difference in grade. Can you go to the next slide?
Let me point out too, that that's a fairly common condition. Anytime your street grade in front of your house, 3% on a 100-foot lot will generate 3 feet of drop across that lot. So Roan is in the valley. It's not a hillside by any means. It's just common farm ground slope. And so that's fairly common that you'll get that condition there.
Okay. This is just our, the piece of wood that was cut showing 9 feet. So basically we've got 9 foot on that side, just showing you that. Let's go to the next slide. Again, the chubby guy showed up showing you what a 6 foot fence it looks like. I think the cap's 2 inches because I'm 6'2", right? You said that's right. So I think I was 6'3" at one point in my life, but I've shrunk a ½ inch or so. So there we go. There's that picture. Let's go to the next. Okay. So I'm trying to remember the street we took this one on, Cody. Is this
Lava Cove.
Is it on Lava? Okay. So just looking at that, this is a corner lot and it's on Lava. And that wall, just looking at it from this perspective or looking at the picture, to me, it appears to be a 6 foot wall. It's not. It's actually an 8 foot wall. So let's scroll to the next slide. This is where he asked me, and this is kind of funny, do you want a straight on picture or a side profile? Which is your better side? And I'm just saying, does it really matter? So, but this is actually 8 foot in height. So it's a little bit taller than you think. And so what were your comments on that one, Cody?
And again, we'll be asking for more direction, but currently 5 feet behind sidewalk, you can go up to 6 feet. This, from my interpretation, would be in violation of the current ordinance. So we're looking at some modifications to that, and we will be asking for open discussion.
Yeah, being that this is a corner lot, and that's a good point, Cody, because the lot next to it, just to the left, to my left, the way I'm looking at it, the picture's left, I'm sorry, is a standard interior lot, where the other lot's a corner lot. So for the standard interior lot, that wall height being 8 feet tall or taller, and you can see they've brought the vegetation up a little bit, but it still exceeds 6 feet on the top cap, creates a visibility issue for someone backing up out of the driveway or a pedestrian walking on the sidewalk. They may not see that person until it's too late because of the height of the fence or the wall. So that's always a concern in our mind. And that's where we have right now, and you saw it on the previous example in Roan, in that 15 foot, that 15 foot setback area from property line or back of walk, that solid wall is allowed at 3 feet. Now, if it's an open style fence, they can go at 4 feet to the property line. They can go up another foot and be a foot higher. But if it's solid, it's only allowed to be 3 feet in that first 15 foot for that sight distance or visibility to make it safe, because not everybody's in a truck or a Jeep. A lot of folks are in a passenger car and you're just not going to see over that. So that's always a concern. But when you just look at this from that other perspective, it really doesn't look like an 8 foot wall until you walk up to it.
Is the garage, and was that part of the original building permit application? Was this an add-on? It was part of the original?
It appears to be the home. It appears to be the same age. I don't know. It may have trickled in a year or so later, but fairly new home.
Is that, it's a driveway.
Well, it's and I view that differently. It's a secondary driveway. That's definitely for an RV or an outbuilding where they have an attached garage. So line of sight is it's always a safety sensitive item. But on a secondary access where they're in and out of that, 6 or 8 times a year, it doesn't hold quite as much merit as the primary drive.
Let's go to the next slide. One more. So here we're getting onto some back facing lots. And we're on Pioneer Parkway. And so these are rear loaded homes. And that's kind of a bit of a sound wall, because you've got a little bit of concrete retainer and then the block wall above. But that's the lowest part I could find. There is some road slope there in that area on these lots, but that's right at 9 feet. So, we've got 9 foot there, rear loaded wall, bit of a sound wall probably for the folks that live there. But based on what I see there, and I couldn't hop over the fence, that's probably giving them that 6 feet of privacy because of the grade, the changes in grade from road grade to the grade, finished grade of their homes. Let's go to the next one. And actually, this is our last slide. We just put a dozen or so in here to get the conversation going and talk to you about it. You can see we've got a bit of a hodgepodge. We've got the blocks, we've got concrete, we've got different styles of fence, different heights. Not everything is consistent or compliant with the ordinance that's in place. I think over time, folks have just kind of done their best to separate that road grade from their backyard and their privacy. But you can see there's a lot going on here, like some of the other pictures. And, it's existing, and this has been here for quite some time. But we just wanted to give you some examples of some of the things we're looking at. When's a permit needed or necessary? What are the standards on a retaining wall for a permit? What are the standards on a wall for a permit? What about an interior lot? What about a corner lot? What about general requirements that are easily readable and understandable for someone that comes in? And the fact of the matter is, I think it's good to have a process where the contractors, sign companies, and those folks come in and talk to us. Cody's had a lot of experience in this area where he's been able to look at a plan and say that's a go or that's a no-go. Coming and talking to us rather than getting a stop work order when they're halfway through their project because someone complains, we go out and it doesn't comply with the ordinance. We've got a problem on our hands. So do we talk to them now? Do we talk to them later? Do we risk a stop work? So that's kind of the thing, trying to make it where the word's out there. They know we're going to work with them and they know that the ordinance is clear and consistent. So that's the discussion and that's what we're trying to do. And Cody, any thoughts?
Yeah, just a few in closing. A few things we were asked to clean up. The reason for the 9-foot story pole is that will be an option in the rewriting of the ordinance, that if you move the wall solely on your lot, that you'll be entitled to that 9-foot wall in sections, which were, again, that'll be a discussion. The other thing is the permitting, what requires permitting and what doesn't. So we've fallen back into the International Residential Code that allocates the parameters in which we're able to require a permit. And those parameters are 4 feet of retaining measured from the bottom of footing to top of wall. Anything short of that doesn't require a permit, unless the developed height, if they did some retainer and then topped it with fence block, was over 7 feet, then of course it falls back into the requirements for a permit. So you'll see those added into the ordinance. And then the last item is the permitting, the code, which I covered. So the permitting in the code will go hand in hand. Right now, we are requiring a permit on every fence, and I want to do a review. I want to see it on paper. It's an easier fix on paper than it is on after a Saturday and this thing blows up and we find it. So I want to offer a review, and we may do a review fee at that point. But so those are the items. The 9-foot pole, the code, and the permit are the items that we're putting a lot of attention to. Any questions for us?
These last 2 lots, they on the south side of Pioneer?
Yeah, they're on the Pioneer.
Red Mountain and Rachel. Yeah. Dustin, what was there first, Pioneer or the subdivision? What was there first, the subdivision or Pioneer? Because this wouldn't be allowed under the current ordinance right now without the landscape strip, right?
Right.
It would be a double fronted lot, would require a privacy wall and the landscape strip.
Yeah, it's intrusive when you put 9 feet right up against the sidewalk and, you can see that.
My point is that condition right there was created by the city because we built the road after the subdivision was developed, and the city was trying everything they could to get as much roadway as they could. So they cut the road in after. A normal subdivision under the ordinance we've got now, that'd be a double fronted lot. It would have to have at least a 6-foot privacy wall and a 10-foot landscape strip on the outside of the wall in order for it to get approved. So
Mayor, wouldn't under now the developers required if there's over we just implemented a retaining ordinance, the developers putting those retaining walls in, so you'd have like some consistency there.
yeah, and that's something you guys will look at too. If the wall's going in with the subdivision versus the going in with the home.
Yeah, we talked about it briefly with Dustin, and he introduced us to a new section called the construction standards, which, we're aware of them now, and we're just wondering, I guess, with your direction, whether we should marry those two and discuss them at the same time or keep this separate where we're strictly dealing with private properties as opposed to construction design property.
I would make sure that they're at least consistent. With each other. But you shouldn't be able to do anything on the subdivision that you wouldn't allow the residential builder to do. That makes sense?
Right. The one said is the construction standards, the specifications, where the other is city code, but we want the language to work.
You want to be consistent because the construction standards are going to apply anywhere that, like that 6-foot wall and the landscape strip, going to apply in there. That's part of the subdivision ordinance. So just make sure they're consistent with each other.
I lived in a home that the neighbor was 5 feet higher with his property line than on my side. And by agreement, we put the wall right down the property line, but my side is 10 feet high. 5 of it retaining and 4 of it retaining and 6-foot wall on top. And I mean, I loved it for privacy. I didn't want to have him looking down into my backyard. And so I would think we'd want to make sure that we're still maintaining that ability for private property owners to really have the privacy that they're needed. And I don't know if that's prior to the new ordinance or it was probably before they had ordinances. I don't know.
Well, they'd still be able to do it even under this one. They would just, in your case, you'd have to go get planning commission approval to go to 10. You can, and then you'd have to have the bottom wall engineered. The retaining wall would have to be engineered as part of the application. It's still possible to achieve it. They're just
well, and I think
permit
that the
required.
retaining wall being engineered is a positive because later on, the top 2 blocks of that fence started, the top 2 of the retaining wall hadn't been grouted and it started to crack. And so the whole wall was on the verge of coming down. And we didn't know that it hadn't been grouted up 4 feet. So yeah, it's important to have those things taken care of.
I've got a couple questions and comments on the 6 feet max at the street. I believe our pool ordinance, doesn't it require a 6-foot wall or is it 5 foot?
It's currently at 6. And there again, we're cleaning that up. The commercial code is 6, but through and our language in this section of the ordinance needs to be updated. It's still referencing the International Residential Code, which is no longer, it doesn't carry the language for swimming pool barriers. The language is now in the International Pool and Spa Code. So, and long answer, but you can go down to 4 feet on a residential pool. And so since we're adopting that language, we're going to follow suit and have residential pool. Well, we're going to present a 4 foot on residential and then keep the commercial at 6 feet.
Oh, and the reason I ask that is if we require a minimum 6 foot on a pool wall, and I'll use my house as a perfect example that parallels the street at 5 feet, yet we're limiting that to a maximum of a 6 foot wall, you're going to run into a you've got a maximum of 6 feet at the street, but a minimum of 6 feet for the pool wall. And so it sounds like we ran into this in Entrada as well, as there's got to be some buffer to allow that we meet the minimum pool requirement on that. So I just, on that, but it sounds like you're ahead of that already. So,
Well, we're trying to be, but keep in mind also that measurement's taken from the outside in. So if you have a wall at 6 feet from the outside in, that's your barrier.
yeah.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But like if you're 5 feet off the street and you're required a maximum of 6 feet on the street side, because that's your visual, that's for visual. That's a minimum standard for a pool, but a maximum standard for a street side wall from the outside in. So they're and you have a slope grade, you're either going to exceed the 6 feet maximum, which is where you probably need to go liability wise, because you don't want to be less than 6 feet on a pool. I still think we ought to look at pools regardless, where covers go in and things like that, but that's a whole separate thing. But I just on that when I'd heard that on the side of that, as far as the 6 feet being 5 feet off property line, which is what we did at our home. On that, on the concrete you showed, and I don't know if it's something we look at on a poured concrete wall. This might be a perfect one that it's required to be painted. That that first one you showed with the big concrete blocks, maybe we look at if they're going to use stacked diamond block, or stacked concrete block, that it needs to paint to be more consistent with. I don't know if that's something, because it is. I mean, you look at these here, and if that, on the right hand side was painted some type of red, it would at least blend a little better. And I didn't know what's that?
I want mine blue.
Blue would be great. The other thing is just a setback, and you brought it up, as you come up again as property owners, as you're coming up with a retaining wall, and then you've got a setback. There's obviously from the homeowner side, you're trying to keep your backyard as large as possible. And so, is that a 2 foot setback? Is it a 4 foot setback? I got worried when you said it was 6 and 6, because 6 feet in a backyard, but I don't know if the council has, if
Well, currently you could go a foot behind sidewalk with a smaller retainer. It's just when you get to the higher heights that you're blocking or you're impeding the pedestrian traffic. So you could start with a retainer a foot behind sidewalk, so Public Works get in behind sidewalk and change out panels as needed. And then you move in with a buffer, and it's a 1-to-1. So if you're a 3 foot retainer, then you would move 3 feet in, and then you could do your six feet of wall. Or if you have more to retain, you would again tier it. So you tier a system, and you start eating into your back or side yards at that point.
And is 1-to-1 in our ordinance now? Is that what's written
Yes.
there? Yikes.
And on that issue, if you have agreement between the two private property owners and you want to build one wall on the property line, is that permitted? Or do you still have to do?
You can go up to 9 feet currently.
Okay, but what I'm saying is you don't have to do the 2 foot setback. You can do the retaining wall and then move in 2 feet and go up. If you've got an agreement between the two property owners, you can do your 9 foot wall.
Yeah, just as the picture and Roan represented, you can do that with the property owner's consent.
Okay,
That's going to.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, if you'd like us to entertain, I have some background in that, finishing or wall materials and finished materials for walls exposed to public ways. I'm happy to, but I don't want to waste a lot of time on it unless I have your direction.
Well, and I didn't know, the pictures you showed, you're just going, geez, so we just built a home in Green Springs up on the hill. We've got 35 feet of retaining with that concrete block. And it's, again, if we had to go 1-to-1 on
And you can still do that.
you
here.
would it go to the planning commission on
it
something like
goes-
that?
In that case here, it's going to go to probably the Hillside Review and the Planning Commission as
Okay.
part of the subdivision.
That was
Okay.
probably a hillside overlay or
Yeah.
Okay, that's all.
That wall's being built,
Yeah,
being approved as part of the subdivision approval
right.
process. And so we've got the same thing at the hills now.
Yeah.
And we just went through those larger retaining walls out at the hills
Perfect.
as part of the
Perfect.
subdivision.
Okay.
Process.
Just so we're covering it there. The last thing, and this is not, because you brought up the visual aspect of the walls coming out on the street. And this is a little bit for our planters. So if you drive down, not in our city, but go down Tabernacle and hit Main Street right there at that roundabout, they've got all those beautiful planters there with 5 and 6 foot vegetation that you couldn't see a person standing ready to get into that sidewalk. So we require walls to step down to 3 feet, 4 feet if they're fencing where they go out to the street. And yet we, in many cases, I think we've been pretty good with this, but we plant planters with vegetation and trees. And, I think of Snow Canyon Parkway going out toward Ivans, visually, you can't see a lot of that traffic coming on because they're planted. I just think it's something this isn't specific to this, but as our streets are busier and there's more pedestrians, there's some cases where you wouldn't, I actually had my wife get out and stand in and took a picture out sitting because you couldn't see a pedestrian in some of those areas. So I think we have the same kind of responsibility. We want a beautiful city, but we've got to make sure some of those crosswalks and pedestrian accesses that's not for you guys, but.
Well, in a sense that it is in triangulated areas at intersections, and we spoke briefly about the triangle. Well, it left it, the current language leaves it to the building official, which I'd like to have. I'm going to implement something a little bit more sound and solid to create a triangulated area at the main driveway as well, to where you are restricted in what you put in those areas just for that. And hopefully that can trickle across throughout the city. But yeah, we want to keep things low in those areas so we don't have accidents.
I think, don't we already have that by ordinance? I mean, a corner, you can't have shrubbery or so forth. But I think this is a code enforcement issue to me, something that we turn over to the code enforcer. I mean, they should periodically drive through the areas and kind of look at intersections and say, oh, that shrub. I can think of one right offhand going on to Crestview that it's definitely blocked to the right. You can't see anything, and it's 2 blocks from the school. I mean, it's just, and those kind of things need to be looked at, and the code enforcer needs to visit with. I mean, it's not something that I'm sure they wouldn't take care of if they were made aware of the situation. But
Right. And that's a great comment. Both of you, the comments are really good. And this has been good dialogue. What I've seen is commercial shopping centers, more mature shopping centers where that landscaping is great, but it gets really mature and it gets out by the access drive and the ingress and egress to and from the center. And some of that shrubbery gets to be 3.5, 4, 5 foot high, and they don't trim it until code enforcement goes out and tells them to do so. So that kind of hits the nail on the head. They need to bring that down to 2 or 3 feet so people can see around it. The roundabouts, the circles, that area that you're referring to, I've driven by there quite a few times because it's pretty cool what's been created over there. And it's neat, but is it as pedestrian friendly as everybody thinks? Is there some site visibility problems there? And you see the chicanes and you see the examples of traffic calming. And I think there's good examples and examples that aren't as good. And so we need to, keep those in mind as well. So good comments.
Any other feedback, council? Got what you need?
You want to mess with design standards?
Sure.
Maybe that's the next code amendment.
We may want to recount
Little steps.
I will say, Mayor, this is something, just listening to the builders, this is something that will be not, because it's a process. I think you said that looking at what's going to require inspection, what's not, because it's time you guys have got to spend, it's time homeowners have got to spend. So certainly anything we can help simplify and clean up and make a little more clear, should help everybody, both the city and the resident.
Happy to do that. Just one more question. What you say to unfinished concrete, that became popular with the contemporary colors. I didn't see it too much until the whites and grays started gaining popularity. With that, I'm seeing unfinished walls, back to the gray block. Items you want to address, or you want it colored or stained, or give me some sort of.
I think we can
open-ended.
add like a section or a paragraph that just.
It doesn't work.
Okay, okay,
I don't,
I mean, if we learned anything on Jim's RV,
yeah.
we should learn that.
Yeah. All right, we'll move forward with what we have, and we will revisit it. So thank you.
Thanks for your
guys.
time this evening.
Okay, Roger, one more chance. You ready? Okay, let's jump down to items. Have you got your man on the phone?
Yeah, we've got Mark Beauchamp.
Okay, I was just bluffing. Is this item 4 or 3? The Mark's on the phone. 3? Okay, item A3, power rate increase and power cost adjustment, PCA discussion. Mr. Hall.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. We're bringing back again our rate discussion. We discussed it a few months ago about our rate increase and our cost of service study that Utility Financial Solutions has done for us. I think they've done a great job. They've put a lot of effort into this study. On the phone, we have Mark Beauchamp, and he will, I'll turn the time over to him, and he can kind of go over this again. And first of all, do you have any questions from our last discussion on this?
Yeah, for me, it's just that power cost adjustment, how that works exactly.
Okay, he'll go over that. We're kind of explaining two different items. We'll have the rate increase and then the power cost adjustment. He'll explain both of them tonight again. He probably won't spend a lot of time on the rate increase. We went over it quite extensively last time, but the council had a lot of questions on the PCA, and he'll go in a little more depth on this discussion. It'll be 2 different action items for another regular council meeting. So we can discuss the implementation time, when you'd like to implement both of these items. But right now, I'll just turn the time over to Mark.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Is it okay if I share my screen so I have control over the presentation?
Yes.
All right. All right. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you again. And as we talked about, we had gone through several items in previous discussions. One is the long-term financial projection and the targets. We reviewed certain targets such as debt coverage ratio, how much cash the utility need to maintain at a minimum, and what a target operating income was. We also looked at the cost of service results, what your monthly customer charges are currently, and what the cost of service study said they should be. We also reviewed rate designs and the power cost adjustment. And part of what came out of the last meeting after we reviewed the rate design was because we experienced such high power supply costs during the summer, and our intention was to implement both the rate design and the power cost adjustment in January, what the rate implications were. And so we ran those numbers, and I want to go through, I want to just do a brief overview before I get into the power cost adjustment and those impacts, as well as the rate designs and some things for the council to consider when it comes to the power cost adjustment. So possibly delaying the implementation of power cost adjustment. I will explain why. We have quite an extensive capital improvement program moving forward. Obviously, we're looking at purchasing generating units and some capital improvements in your distribution system. And part of that is being funded through debt issuances, and that is identified under these assumptions. Under the assumptions in this corner. Now, obviously, we looked at growth rates, and this is our projected growth rates, and the changes in power supply cost. So now when we looked at the summary of the financial projections and what our proposed rate track was, we're looking at a series of 2.5% rate adjustments. And what we discussed with council was to implement a rate design for the next 3 years. In other words, where we would design rates for January 1 of 2022, January 1 of 2023, and January 1 of 2024. And a couple of reasons for that. The main one being that there's the financial projection is built on a lot of assumptions. We went through several of those. I just kind of hit them at a high level, but some of those assumptions may materialize and some may not. And so what I would like to do before we do the last 2 years of rate adjustments is to actually take another look at the financial projection to see if those rate adjustments are still needed or if they need to be increased. But part of the reason we're proposing this rate track is primarily to keep your cash reserves, which are projected to run between 2.5 and 2 million and 2.8 million. And the minimum cash reserves we're trying to stay above is about $2 million. So you see this rate track keeps us right at or slightly above, in a sense, that minimum cash reserve calculations. Because you're in very good financial position, you're basically a debt-free utility, very minimal debt. Your debt coverage ratio, which is over here, is not a problem. The minimum is about 1.4. You're running at about 1.8. Your target operating income, you have positive operating incomes. And in 2024, with this rate track, we're looking at about 350,000 of projected operating income. Our upper boundary, I call it a target, but it's really an upper boundary, is about 500,000. So we're slightly below it. So with this rate track, we're projecting that the utility will stay in very good shape financially. So with that, I'm going to go through and go to the power cost adjustments. Now, one of the things that we are proposing is to implement a power cost adjustment. What a power cost adjustment is that as power supply costs go up or down above a certain base, that those power supply costs get passed on to customers. Sometimes there's increases, or their bills go up. Sometimes the power cost adjustment is negative. But one of the things that we try to avoid with the power cost adjustment, the one negative with it, is that it has the potential to be jumping up and down if you do it on a month-to-month basis. So what we proposed is what we called a 6-month rolling average. So in other words, we look over the last 6 months as far as the changes in power supply cost. And so if there's any month that goes up, it isn't immediately felt by customers. It's kind of phased in slowly over a period of the next 6 months. So you don't see these large fluctuations in it. They're more gradual changes. Now, unfortunately, because of the large increase in power supply costs this summer, now when we looked at the September bills, it looks like the power supply costs are starting to stabilize. And if we were to implement this power cost adjustment in January, it's probably the worst point in time to implement the power cost adjustment, because we still have those high power supply costs that we're trying to work through from last summer. And when we looked at the impacts, this was presented in the last study, that your power supply cost, basically the utility right now is absorbing about $645,000 of additional power supply costs from this past summer. And what we're projecting is by January, that we'll be absorbing about $850,000. But because of the power supply cost stabilizing, what we're looking at is actually implementing the power cost adjustment mechanism probably in the March timeframe. And the reason is because when we looked at the impacts, in other words, down here, this is the power supply cost, the rate design change. But down here is the impact of implementing the power cost adjustment on a residential customer. And if we implemented it in January, the customers would see about a $3 increase because of the change in the rate design. But they'd also see a $28 increase on their monthly bill because of the power cost adjustment and because of what happened last summer. And based on our projections, if we delayed the implementation from January to March in that 2-month time frame, we're projecting that this power supply cost impact will drop to about $7 a month. And yes, the utility will have to absorb that $800,000, but we feel that the utility can absorb it for now in its current cash reserves, especially try to mitigate or minimize the impacts that the implementation of this power cost adjustment will have on customers should we implement it in January. And so one of the things we're looking at and we're proposing to the council is to do the rate design change in January, but to delay the implementation of the power cost adjustment until March. And the utility, like I said, will have to absorb those additional costs that we're incurring. But I don't really want to implement a new change and then have a customer see that large of an impact because of it, especially when we know it's going to drop. So one of the main questions for council, and this is one of the things that came out of our last discussion, is this kind of what you were looking for? And does it help answer your question? And do you agree with our assessment to delay the implementation of the power cost adjustment?
Mark, this is Mayor Rosenberg. The power cost adjustment, if we started it in March, does it adjust every month after that?
It does. It adjusts every month, but it's based upon the last 6 months. So to give you an example, if we implemented it in March and then May has a large increase in power supply cost, you're not going to see a large increase after the month of May, because that large increase in May is going to be averaged over the whole 6-month period, the 5 months previous, and the month of May also. So in other words, they only get 1/6 of that increase in June, if that's another way of looking at it.
Right, but will be if assume is next summer, do you anticipate the power supply costs doing the same thing they did this last summer?
That is a great question. And you have some advantages coming into next summer. And those advantages are that you're looking at installing those Caterpillar generating units. And based on our initial assessment, it looks like what happens when you have generating units. And I had mentioned this back last July when you were looking at purchasing them, is when you have your own generation, they're there to protect you against those high power supply costs. So if the market prices increase dramatically, you're capped in a sense. You're capped at the generating cost of those units. And if you were to assume like a $5 per MMBTU gas rate, based on our estimate, it would be about 6 or 7 cents a kilowatt hour, which is what those generating units would produce for or produce at. So your costs are limited, or that's kind of your cap. So, and the other part of it is that if the power supply costs are such that they go up substantially and you don't need the power, you can generate the power and sell it into the market and then actually earn money. I believe they're in front of the meter, not behind the meter, where you could do that. But that is an option also, where you could actually sell into the market.
Gary, when do you expect the generators to all be online?
They're supposed to show up the first of the year, January, February. So they will be ready by May. We've got a commitment from
And
Wheeler
the
that
two that are busted will be,
same time. They're both shipped off, both parts that on both of them are shipped off, and we're hoping to see them back by the first of the year as well.
so by next May, we'd have all four up and running.
Yes.
Because what I wouldn't want to do is base it on the last 6 months, when they're the 6 lowest months of the year. We've already absorbed an $850,000 loss. And then all of a sudden, we're going to have to delay. If power cost goes up again, we're absorbing another loss until that PCA gets up high enough to cover it.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
So you really got 2 seasons there. So it's going to be really important if we put this off until March, that those generators are operational shortly thereafter.
Yeah. They will be.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I guess I part of the reason, I don't really like the thought of the idea of absorbing, that full $800,000. But when I looked at that impact and the dollar impact on customers, I didn't think it would be good for the electric utilities from a public's perception to implement and hit customers that quickly with it.
Council, what's your thoughts on delaying the implementation of the PCA to save the customers that, and then absorbing that cost for the rest of this year, I guess?
Well, and Mark kind of hit on this, but the reason we bought the generators, so we knew, hey, come summer, we're going to be able to pick up that. So we won't run again. Once we have all that in place, are we not going to be able to know, hey, we're going to be able to generate at $60 to $70 a megawatt hour to pick up that additional 10 megawatts we need, or, at peak days I guess that's where I'm kind of looking at. We've just bought those to try to avoid this. Are we not going to know we have enough power bought? How many megawatt hours are we looking at with our generation capacity now and what we already have purchased?
With what we have purchased with the 2 new generators, we'll only be looking at buying maybe 4 megawatts on the market, 4 to 5.
Which just take that 4, the other 2, we are looking at times buying into 9 megawatts. So you're cutting that in half.
Yeah. We're going to be buying about half of what we were on the market this current year. So, and who knows what the market's going to be? That's a hard question. If there's any natural disasters or weather related instances, it's just hard to tell what the market's going to do. Plus with the coal and everything else, it's just really hard to guess what the power prices are going to be.
The loss of the Colorado River Storage Project power is what I think is going to be your biggest influence this year. They told Dixie Power they could expect to lose 40% of their Colorado River storage power this summer because of the Lake Powell water levels.
Yeah, it doesn't have much left to go before they have to stop generating. Lake Powell.
So Dixie Power slamming in a 6 generator station plant right now, trying to get it built and operational before next summer to offset just that loss. But if all the systems that are on Colorado Storage Project lose that much power, they're going to be out on the market. You're going to have more demand than supply. Your prices are going to go up again. That's my concern. It's going to be really critical that we get those generators in place.
No, I agree. And that's where I get, like I said, it just trying to control, nothing's, I don't know, I'm going to make vent here, but we cut out all these inexpensive, generation facilities and then realize, oh, hell, might change that on the minutes, but now what do we do? Because it's going to go through the roof. And yet we're going to, you've heard me say this, we're going to walk into affordable housing meeting, tomorrow. So, but yet we're killing our affordable energy that has the most direct impact on affordable living. So, but the generators are there. When you're talking this, I just think we've got to take every possible means. We bought extra from the Idaho plant that won't be on until 29 if everything goes the same. And then we've got 10 megawatt hours here on our generators. I just hope we don't have to hit people with $30 or $40, $50 additional on top of the 10% we're going to increase over the next
Mark,
4 years.
I got a question on the debt coverage ratio. Does the debt coverage ratio in the chart you showed us include the 850,000 that we're eating?
It does, yes.
All right. So we're still maintaining our debt coverage ratio, even though we had to eat that 850.
That's correct. Yeah.
When you go to the 2021 power cost changes and you're projecting a 20.9% change by this year.
Yeah, that was this year. Last year, it was a
7.9%.
7% increase from the previous, from 2019. Right. 21 was almost a 21% increase.
And we use the reserves to pay those differences.
Yes.
And so with the power cost increase, how much does that reduce this change? I mean, is it going to go from 20.9% down to, as we increase the 2.5% per year? What are we looking at? Maybe I'm not making myself clear.
I think I know what you're saying is with the generating units, how much, if we increase by 20.9%, what will be the change next year? I think is what your question is. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Well, it's unfortunately
state this. I understand, right? If we had the power cost adjustment in place this current year,
Right.
what would be that reserve that we would have had to come out of reserves? Right now, we're saying 645, but if we had the power cost adjustment already in place, what would we had to use out of reserves to cover that increase, Mark? Does that reduce it to zero?
I think your question is what would the reserve levels be at the end of 2021 if you didn't have to cover the 645? Is that correct? In other words, if you look at at this slide where I'm projecting a cash balance of 2.4 million, what would that cash reserve be if you did not have to absorb the 645? Is that correct?
Yeah, if we had the power cost adjustment was already in place today.
How much
this is the end of 2022. So it's probably going to be, I'm thinking it's going to be right around, it's hard to really say because we're going to recover part of it, but not all of it, in the power supply cost changes. My guess is that of the 800,000, we're probably going to have to absorb about 400,000 to 500,000 in total when I think about it, because we will pick some of it up when we implement the power cost adjustment in March. We just won't pick up the big months. So that 2.4 million probably would have been about $300,000 or $400,000 higher without, if you had implemented it. Probably in the $2.9 million range.
Okay.
So I have a question, couple of questions, a comment, and maybe a couple of questions. My comment is I went in and used the PCA forecast that's on the cost of change for January and calculated what my electric would be just as a cost comparison to see what it would do along with the rate change that we're looking to implement.
Yeah.
My bill goes up by 20%, just a tad over 20%, which is, I think, what you're saying to delay it to March.
Correct.
Because that we will have residents screaming if their bills go up over 20%. It just, we will get crucified if we do that, especially if they're on fixed incomes. There's just no way for them to be able to absorb that. I realize that come March or even July, that PCA number is going to change per kilowatt hour, but I also ran it just for July and my bill went up by 22%, assuming the same PCA number.
Yeah.
So we've got to figure out a way to get that PCA number to come down to make that more reasonable for our citizens. That's my comment. And then my questions are twofold. One, is the base that you have in your presentation, is it based on a fiscal year or is it based on a calendar year? Because I know it notes in there that it only changes once per year, but it doesn't note when. And then my second question, Gary, you can probably answer this, is how many residential customers do we have?
Yeah, if I could answer the base question, that base number, which I forget what it is, 6.5 cents, somewhere around there, that's in there until we actually formally change it. In other words, for the next 3 years, that number is fixed. The base is fixed at 6.5. So as the power supply, 6.5 is not the correct number. I think it's in that ballpark.
Okay. And then
my point being is that number is fixed. So in the next 3 years, any variations from that base number is going to be passed on to customers, either positive or negative. And then in 2025, possibly we true up the base. But we'd have to look at that time.
Okay, so you're talking about the PCA base, so it's not going to change annually.
No, not the base.
Okay.
No, now the power supply cost, this PCA that I'm referring to right here, that number, that will change monthly based on a rolling 6-month average. So if you looked at, I think, let's see, I think in one of these slides right here, if you were to look at, we looked at the previous years, if we had implemented this a year ago, what would have happened in the calendar year 2020? How would this power cost adjustment have changed? And that's what this is showing right here. So you see that the power supply cost in January 2020 would have been implemented at 0.002, then 0.00155. You can see the changes, goes negative. Part of the reason it goes negative during the summer months in this year, even though the power supply costs are higher in the summer, is because of that 6-month rolling average, where we're using these more stable months in January, February, and March to calculate the power supply costs in the summer. So you can see when you look at our customer's bill standpoint, you can see there's only modest changes on a month-to-month basis, which is kind of what we're trying to do.
And with the additional generators, it won't be as much of an impact next year as it would have if we would have implemented it this year.
Correct.
It'll be quite a bit less. So you won't see a 20% increase next year with our generation, because we won't be buying that much on the market.
Correct.
To answer your question about the residential customers, I believe, I don't have an exact number. I believe it's right around 2,800, 2,900. Oh, maybe more than that.
Well, that's not far off.
29, thanks.
2962. Thanks.
Mark, I guess the major question is where are you going to find us some cheap power?
Sorry, what was that?
I said the major question is where are you going to find us some cheap power?
Oh, yeah, really? I wish I could do that. I'd be a very wealthy person if I could.
Shutting them all down.
You know,
They do. They're shutting
Reality is.
I just want to comment about something. What you experienced last summer and what Texas experienced in February, right now, the entire electric industry is in transition. And, we're going from what we call dispatchable generating unit, which is primarily fossil fuel, to a more renewable type environment related to solar, wind, hydro type facilities. And we don't have the batteries. The technology is not totally there yet, but it's coming along. But our industry is in transition in that very few utilities are building dispatchable generating units. So that's part of the reason why we see these large variations in power supply costs. Because if the renewables aren't producing, which a lot of times they're not, and the demand is there, we don't have the capacity on the generation side to actually produce it at a reasonable cost. And that's why you see that like the large spikes what happened in the summer in Utah and what happened in last February in Texas, because Texas did not have those dispatchable units. Utah didn't have enough of the dispatchable generating units. And it's going to be several years before we're able to transition more to renewables. That's part of the reason why I think that Santa Clara made a really good move in the purchase of those generating units, because those are dispatchable generating units. Those are hard assets in a sense that what the cost is to operate them. Yes, the price of natural gas is going to fluctuate, which is going to vary your price to some degree. But the price variations are substantially limited. So in a sense, by purchasing those generating units, it's like an insurance policy for your customers against two things. One, protecting them against large fluctuations in power supply costs, and if worse come to worse, more reliable power, because if something ever were to occur to the transmission system, you can at least generate a certain percentage of your power with those generating units. So from a reliability standpoint and from a cost standpoint, as far as limiting those fluctuations, those generating units, in my opinion, is a really good move. So is there any questions about that? No, I'm talking theoretically right now. But.
Can I ask one more question? In this presentation he did, there's a notation about a substation upgrade for roughly $2 million in 2025. I went and looked at our capital facilities plan, and I can see there's a notation for the South Hills new substation. Is that referencing the same thing, or is the substation upgrade something entirely different?
There is a substation upgrade, but it is two separate things. There's a substation upgrade for the Hassel substation, but it wasn't the $2.5 million. I think that was for the South Hills substation.
Okay. So what is hang on, let me go back to the top of here. Up in the servicing on, sorry, it's clear at the top. On the debt servicing, it's on page 3. It shows that there's a bond being issued in 2025 for $2 million. And it notes that it's a substation upgrade. I'm assuming that's being used in the calculations in this, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's for the Hassel station?
That would probably be the new, in 2025, that would be for the new substation in the South Hills.
Okay. So this isn't accounting for any cost for this upgrade?
That's already been budgeted
Okay.
for the upgrade, yeah.
So I guess some of my comments would be, it's kind of a side thing, but branding might be important on this. I looked up, like Dixie Power calls it a wholesale power cost adjustment. I think that kind of softens a little bit, that this isn't just a fee we're charging customers, it's based off of a wholesale cost. Rocky Mountain Power calls it an energy balancing account. It's probably another way to disguise it even better. I don't know. That might help people kind of understand what that thing is on their bill if we make sure we just brand it the right way. Is there anything in this that protects our residents if someone in the utility department kind of falls asleep at the wheel and we end up having to pay some crazy rate that isn't out there in the market, but just because we didn't buy the right resource or we weren't paying enough attention, or do they just get charged that either way?
They would get charged either way. I mean, well, UAMP primarily does the dispatching of the units for you, but yes, it would be whatever those costs are.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't mean that if something crazy happened, and we've done this in several utilities, that if the utility had adequate reserves to protect the customers, it's possible, you could draw down on your reserves if you felt that that was a good thing to do temporarily. And like, for example, in what happened in Texas, we had several utilities that we actually had them draw down on their reserves temporarily to minimize it. Actually, in Utah, we did the same thing. We had them draw down on their reserves, kind of like what I'm doing here for you guys, or what I'm recommending for you guys. It's really to draw down any reserves to protect the customers. So, and those are one-off decisions that are made by council. Should something like that happen.
Okay. And yeah, I'm a little concerned about just using the same base for a 3-year period. That doesn't really account for COLA or inflation or anything. I much prefer that is updated yearly. That just seems to make more sense.
Well, I just want to give you, it doesn't, that is not going to affect the rate, because what happens is if we true it up, like let's say the rate is 6.5 cents, all right, is the base. And we want to increase the base to 7 cents. So that's a 0.5 cent increase. Well, what we need to do is increase all the energy rates by 0.5 cent to reestablish the base at 7 cents. So it's not done for, in other words, this would all have to increase. If we wanted to go from a 6.5 cent base to say out here, a 7 cent base, all of these numbers would have to increase by a 0.5 cent. The main reason why utilities true up the base is not necessarily to save money, customers money. It's more from the standpoint of fairness, because if the power cost adjustment charge gets too out of line where it gets too high, then this is more of a complicated explanation. But when you get into like these large customers that you have that are higher load factors, they're unfairly burdened if that power cost adjustment gets high, because their peak demand relative to their energy use, they use a lot more energy relative to their peak, best way to put it. And so they're unfairly burdened. I'm getting too deep on that, but that's the only reason to true it up. It's for fairness.
Okay. Can we implement like a max that it would go up, and then it triggers council to approve it going higher or to use reserves? Can there be a mechanism in there where it doesn't just jump randomly and then we get a bunch of calls from residents?
That is something that could certainly be put in place. We did not put that in our recommendations, but it could be.
And then I'd almost rather implement this once we know the generators are going and we know kind of how that affects everything. So maybe it's we wait till June, or I don't know. It'd just be nice to have a full set of data to decide how that affects everything.
Well, you just got to remember that the longer you wait, the more of a financial impact it's going to have on the electric utility and the cash reserves, because that's really what we're drawing from. I felt that we can absorb it for the next couple months into next year, but if we delayed it till June, July, then we're going to be talking, an additional amount of money that we would be absorbing. So there's some concern there. One of the things that, you could ask staff is that if that PCA were to change by, I'm just throwing out numbers, by a half cent a kilowatt hour in any given month, that gets reported to council.
I think we want it reported to council regardless of the change amount.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Yeah.
At least for the start, to get a feel for it.
Yeah, because based on our projections, the PCA and the initial implementation of the PCA is going to be about 0.007 or 0.008 cents. Right now, if we were to implement it in January, I think our projection was a little over 2 cents, like 2.2 cents, I believe it was. I don't think it shows up here. Yeah, because that 1.86 cents down here went up to about 2.2 or 2.5. And if we wait until like March, our projection is it will drop to about the 0.007 or 0.008 range. And that would be the initial starting point. Yeah, here it's actually listed right here, 0.0028 down at the bottom, right here.
Okay, that's all I had, Mayor.
Any other questions for Mark, council?
Can I ask Brock a question?
Mhm.
Can you give us examples so that I can put it in my head of our small, medium, and large commercial? I get it's off of usage, so it's a little hard to do, but
With usage and the demand,
yeah.
we'll try to pull some numbers together on that.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll look at it on the commercial side.
Okay.
Are you talking about the impacts?
Lena,
Or-
you're asking is the increase?
Yeah. I mean, I can see, and we've got them broken out on here. I just don't have any concept of, I mean, in my head, you could say Harmon's is our biggest store, so it's probably large. But my guess is they're probably not, because they have all their solar and they generate. So my guess is they probably fall more into medium.
Yeah.
But somebody else might fall into, I just don't have any realm to guesstimate that.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
to know what impacts and who it might be impacting.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Mark or myself?
There will be. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the presentation. Gary was coming forward when?
Next week, if you guys are okay with it, bringing it back next week for approval.
Council? You want to stew on it a little bit?
No, it's two different, I understand it's two different things. There's the rate increase and the power cost adjustment.
So how would that come back? Are we talking rate increase for 5 years, 2.5% a year?
Well, that'd be,
Or are we
what
proposing?
was originally proposed was on a 3-year.
Correct. 3 years.
Talk about putting the 5, but re-looking at it after 23 to redo it before you implement for sure the 25, 26 to what really would need to be. We have down for a public hearing for next week for the rate increase. My recommendation is that we go forward with that public hearing on the rate increase and have that on the agenda for an approval and an effective date. We can also have on there for the power cost adjustment as well, but a whole separate item for approval or discussion on approval or not to that. Or we can hold off on the power cost adjustment, energy stabilizing fund to a future meeting if they would feel more comfortable in doing that.
Does the
got that.
PCA require a public hearing?
I would say yes, I would do it as because it is
Increase. in
it's
cost.
adding to like to the fee schedule of a rate
My
adjustment. So,
preference would be to do two separate, keep them completely independent of one another so citizens understand, because they're very different. They have
Mhm.
severely different impacts to them.
and as we listen tonight, the rate increases, I think what we need to do now. The power cost adjustment, even as talked about, of waiting to implement anyways, is the better way to go. Is we can wait till the first of the year in January to have that public hearing and have that discussion, or even in December, we could do it. So
So the power cost increase to get into effect by March, we could do it anytime prior to March.
Yeah.
And the rate increase we need to look at now.
Yes.
I'm okay with that.
Everybody's okay?
okay.
Does that sound okay?
Okay, so we'll bring next week public hearing just on the rate increase, and then we'll bring the power cost adjustment side back at another.
Probably after the first of the year, I would
And if-
suggest.
And if you want to have another, I'll say, work meeting, again, if we need to have more discussion on the power cost adjustment, we can have that again. I don't know if council feels comfortable with,
Christelle gonna have that model working?
well, it is that one on, now that works just on the residential side, and it doesn't take into account the power cost adjustment.
So
It
it's just a
is-
rate increase.
Yeah. So, and if council wants to look at that, we can pull that up right now. I can show it to them if they want to look at that on the residential side. What the rate increase looks like. It just doesn't take into account the power cost adjustment.
Could
and what-
she implement that? And have it ready for us in January?
That's a good question to count on the power cost adjustment, if you could account that. I don't know.
I think everybody's feeling pretty good about the rate increase, right?
Yeah.
It's the power cost adjustment, the impacts that would have.
Yeah, I
We
can,
could tweak that model based on the rate increase and then incorporate some assumptions.
yeah, she probably could, working with Mark and Jillian, they probably could get someone to factor into that. What she's put together for the website, she probably could have something in there that would factor into
And
the power cost.
Bring it back to council in January.
Okay,
Maybe the work meeting at the first of the year.
okay.
Because you're gonna have a new council person. That we'll have to bring to speed on that too.
And I like
We'll just
Dana's
throw it out
idea of
there.
having
That's
this
good.
commercial.
Okay.
So we know what the commercial impact and who it is.
So we could pick a specific commercial or a couple of them, say Harmon's, and
Small, medium. and
Small,
large.
medium and large.
try to get all of them in specific ones. So for senator, Brock, would you want to bring that up? And then why Mark is online and why Councilor Heron, just to show him what she's
Yeah,
done.
we'll do, Mark, I'm gonna end your sharing,
Okay.
and then,
While you're looking there, the rate increase, then I was kind of going through, the PCA does a $28 if we implemented it now, what's proposed. The rate increase to an average user, is it $3? Is it $5 or?
For an average user, it was right around $3.33, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, I mean, Jack talked to me several times about just building in that rate increase into our ordinance so that it just happens every year. It doesn't have to come back to us. I don't know if council really wants to consider that, but that would take a lot of this away. We'd still have to have the study to make sure that it's enough or that it's too much or something, but then it would just happen every year.
Yeah, and we've talked about doing a 1% every year regardless, and then reviewing it every 5 years. If that's something you would like to go through, but as far as his Mark's predictions right now, it would need a 2.5% for the next 3 years at least to catch up where you would like the minimum cash reserve and our debt coverage and stuff.
Yes, maybe we just consider that the next study we do, looking at that or something.
Yeah, I'd like to just look at it no longer than 3 years. There's so much
Yeah.
going on in that market
Yeah.
right now.
It's fluctuating so much.
3 years might be too long.
Might be an easy.
So,
Yes.
so here you have, here's this model that she's put together. So we got 1230, 1,230 kilowatts is the average user. So right now, currently your bill would be $128, 31 cents. Year one with the increase, you'd go to 131.50. Year two and year three, if you're on that average. And that, then at the bottom, it compares you to what the other municipalities, as well as Dixie Power and Rocky Mountain Power with their winter and summer rates where we fall. I'm just going to plug my caveat to this and those bottom numbers. Sure those municipalities and those power companies are going to be doing rate increases as well. I mean, I know Dixie Power, when Jackie was on Dixie Power, said that every year for the last number of years, he got rate increases. So I'm sure those numbers would adjust as well. So
Well,
just,
got the Bureau of Reclamation
so.
cutting back too. So they're gonna be having to. Yeah.
Dixie Power's main resource is a coal plant, and once that goes down, their prices are gonna jump up, be close to everybody else's.
There's going to be a lot of shocked people on that side of the river because a lot of them have put heat pumps in. And
So that's the model she's kind of put together. I think it's kind of a neat little tool on the website that residents can get on and use. And Mark, so I don't know what your thoughts are, if Christelle needs some help implementing some of the power cost adjustment into those calculations. I don't know how we would do that, but that would be helpful.
Yeah, we can definitely incorporate that.
Okay, if Christelle needs the help.
That's secret.
What's that?
It's not
Is it-
public yet.
Is that not public yet?
No, she doesn't have it up and running on the
Okay.
website. No, she
It's
doesn't.
in-
She just has it.
It's in development.
Yeah, it's in R&D.
I was
Yeah.
able to use it in my campaign, Jarrett. Just some of my
Yeah.
stuff.
So if the rate is approved and that's something, she probably is there to put it, she'll probably put it on there. There have been things on the website where you can go and look at your power and compare rates we have had on there, but not one that does like this. So.
Jarrett had a moment where he thought maybe there was something on the website he wasn't aware of.
Soon, it'll be there soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey,
Ready.
well, Mark, thanks so much for all your work on this study and your presentation.
Yes, thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Mayor and Council.
The mutual aid agreement, do you have other people signing on for that?
No.
So we can go ahead and go down to
Yes.
item 6. Discussion regarding fiber to the home, Jarrett, and guess?
Yeah, so we've just discussed, there's probably still a few lingering questions that council has before we bring this back for the whole council. So we have Roger Timmerman here, and then is this Laura Lewis as well?
Laura Lewis is here with us. She's the finance guru, our financial advisor for Utopia, but with Lewis Young as a financial advisor for us and many cities across the state. So I can jump in, or if you have an intro or anything you want to do, this is your discussion, but we have plenty of information we could share and do a recap and answer questions.
Yeah, well, council, I sent out those bullet points of kind of the overview. Is there anything that stuck out from those that we need to ask Roger about?
Can you get down to 6?
I don't have there's not anything in the packet, right?
Right, yeah, no, this is just
It was an email that got sent out. I have one question, Roger. The information that Jarrett sent out last week or whenever that was, and the information today on the conference call with St. George City, the numbers were different. Is that the cost increase, reflect the cost increases going through the first of the year? Or what's the
So
difference?
if we were to take 3 to 6 months to make a decision, that's what the cost would be. We'd be looking at 7.3 million. Last June, when we presented, it was a $6.7 million cost. If we're able to move like nearly immediately, we're willing to hold to the old cost structure. And the reason is because we still have materials contracts in place that are good through the end of the year, and all pricing is readjusted, and we will be hit with price increases on conduit and fiber and boxes and all the other stuff. So we would need to reprice with the other cities. And on that conference call, the assumption is that we're probably 6 months at least before any decisions are made. I mean, this hasn't even gone before their councils. They want to create a new interlocal entity and a whole lot of other layers of things that would happen before this actually happens for the other cities. We're supportive of that effort. I mean, we're not opposed to there being an interlocal, but that's their desire, mostly St. George, not something that we're driving. From our perspective, we have a partnership program that works really well. Any cities that are wanting to do that, we're ready and willing to jump on that and run with it. So we don't like to come and say, hey, there's a time on this thing. We don't want to pressure the city, but there is a real cost difference between doing it now and doing it later. And that's, again, what you have from June was a structure where it was going to be a financing of $6.7 million for this project. It's issued by UIA, has a backstop from the city, a revenue guarantee that acts as a backstop that comes out to about $34,000 a month. When we say, well, if we put that in terms of subscribers and take rate, it's about 40% take rate. If we were to wait and we're looking at a $7.3 million project, that take rate requirement would go up. We'd need to have more customers to cover the revenue, and it looks more like a 45% take rate that we would need. So, without saying, hey, there's some urgency, well, hey, there's some urgency.
I'm going to call it opportunity.
There's an opportunity to get this done under a lower price structure. If it needed to be 6 months later from now, I'd say it's still very feasible. I mean, we've seen take rates come up in our networks. I mean, from when we first started talking about this, it would have been like, hey, we're a little bit nervous about getting 30 or 35% take rate. Well, demand has skyrocketed. We see 40+% take rate across many of our cities as take rates and demand keep going up. So, I'm very confident in 40 and 45% take rates, but if we can do a project that's 39 to 40% take rate today versus doing one that requires a higher take rate 6 months from now, and there's support to do it, I'd say, let's do it. Let's get it done. We have the resources to move quickly. We have resources to finance it. The interest rates are good, and we can get into the financing thing. That's always a red flag of like, she carries a crystal ball with her. It's like, what are interest rates going to do? And she does a pretty good job of, well, the last transaction was this, and this is what we see the market at. And, fortunately in this 6 months since, it hadn't been quite 6 months, 4 months, maybe 5 months since we modeled this and put together the terms, interest rates have stayed good. Is that accurate? And the forecast is if we were to approve an agreement, we would immediately order the materials, but it would still take a couple of months to actually close on the financing. But our ability to order the materials is what saves us some cost. But the crystal ball, we're hoping she's like thumbs up that we would expect interest rates to not do anything dramatic between now and 2 to 3 months from now when we would actually close on the financing. Is that accurate?
More pressure for rates to go up and come down. So my
Yeah.
You can sit at the table right there.
We have her here to talk about financing. So.
You can sit at the table, Laura.
Great.
And then you can both stay at the mic. We just need to get you on the tapes.
Understand.
Just state your name for me and who you're with.
Laura Lewis with Lewis Young, Robertson, Birmingham. I'm the financial advisor to Utopia, UIA, and several cities throughout the state.
Thank you. Now you continue. Whatever you were
answer
saying.
the question.
keep going.
Okay. So interest rates. So there is certainly more pressure on interest rates to go up than come down. Everyone's a little bit fearful of inflation, rightfully so. And they're fearful that the Fed is going to, change its program of buying treasuries. I personally have a little bit of worry about what's going on in China and what will happen if they, reduce their buying of treasuries. All of those things have upward pressure on interest rates. My crystal ball isn't very perfect. Otherwise, I wouldn't probably be here, not unlike your guy that, is supposed to predict electric utility rates or whatever. But there certainly is more pressure to go up than come down right now. And so time is of the essence in that regard. Again, not wanting to set off any alarm bells. I don't think they're going to go up 1% next year, but I think they're going to go up. We priced a separate transaction, unrelated to fiber in August. Priced a similar transaction in just a week and a half ago. And in looking at the yield scales that we look at are called MMD. They're put out by Thomson Reuters. It stands for Municipal Market Data. And those yields on average over 30, the spreads were narrower, shorter end and longer in the longer end, but on average, they'd gone up about 17 basis points. 100 basis points is 1%. So every 25 basis points is 1/4%. And when you're talking millions of dollars, that's real money, right? So if this is something you approve, I want to jump right on it as quick as we can. We do have challenges issuing at the end of the year because the markets kind of close up and go home. All the buyers are like, okay, I've packed everything up for what I want my tax position to be, and I don't want to buy municipals right now. I'm hearing that unlike other years, this year might be a little bit different because there's so much cash out in the market. I mean, it's just crazy. So we might get a little bit of an extended window, but we do have Thanksgiving week that's pretty dead, and we have Christmas week that's pretty dead. So, if it is something you'd approve, I try to get right on it, work with your staff to get a rating presentation put together and get the bonds rated and get them issued. Probably the fastest we could realistically do that. It's probably 2 months. You would have to have a public hearing for, actually.
We do the public.
It's our debt hearing. Sorry, thank you. Thanks for correcting that. So that helps speed that along because they can do special meetings a little bit easier. So I think we could get it done in 2 months, but again, I might need 2 months and 2 weeks to allow for those kind of dead weeks in there.
Can you answer how this backstop affects our bond rating usually?
I surely can. And I have several questions that you and I have discussed. I'm happy to, rehearse, some of those answers as well, if you think that would be helpful. So Councilmember Waite asked a very good question. He and I have had a chance to have a phone call, and I have to apologize here in front of everybody that I owed you information that I thought I had sent and did not. So I apologize for that, but I have it all here. I can provide all those answers today. So how it affects your ability, your bond rating, it probably will have no impact on your bond rating. It does impact your ability to issue additional bonds, and you need to be aware of that. So the best way to think of this, there's not, kind of the perfect analogy for everything I do in municipal finance to what you might be used to in the consumer financing world. But one of the things is this kind of thing that's sort of like a backstop. It's kind of like, again, it's not identical, but it's kind of like if you were to co-sign on a kid's car loan, right? You're not planning to use any of your money to make that loan. You're planning on your child making that car loan. But because you've been willing to sign on the dotted line, so to speak, then they get lower interest rates, easier for them to make the payment. So same kind of thing here. But just like if you co-sign on your kid's car loan, if you go in to get your own car loan, they're going to say, oh, you have this potential obligation, right? So even though you're not using any of the money, they will recognize that you have that potential obligation. So, chances are, everywhere Utopia UIA has done this, with these member cities, the system revenues have paid for the debt. So they haven't had to come out of pocket for anything. You would still have all that money flowing through to your general fund to use like you typically do, but you do have that guarantee there. So one thing we modeled at your request was what would our headroom be if you did this, made this commitment. And we've modeled that you would probably be able to issue about $8 to $9 million more in sales tax revenue bonds without running into problems. So I certainly, when I work with cities, I try to say, let's look forward a little bit. What do you have planned in the next 3 to 5 years? And kind of a reasonable time horizon, right? And if you say to me, we're going to build the best fill in the blank, the $10 million rec center or $20 million rec center, I might want to go, well, maybe this isn't something that you ought to be doing today. But we have a lot of tools in our quiver in Utah of how to finance that. So let's say you're not planning on that. You go ahead and do these bonds with this backstop, and you do have a project in 5 years that's $9 million. Do you need to wave the white flag and say, oh gosh, we can't do that? No. A couple of reasons why. Your sales tax revenues are likely to increase because your population is increasing. Your franchise fee revenues are likely to increase because your population's increasing, right? And every time electric rates go up or gas rate goes up, you get more franchise fee revenues. There's a lot of pressure on those to go up. And last but not least, there are other tools that we can use. If you wanted to build my fictitious rec center, we could do that with a structure called a building authority. It works a lot like your home mortgage. The physical facility acts as security, not a pledged revenue source, right? So there are many other tools in the quiver. I wouldn't let that be a stumbling block or a panic reason not to do this. The bonds will be callable. Typically, bonds are callable in 9 years. We've been able to push the underwriters of late because there's such high demand for municipal bonds to have the bonds callable in 8 or 9 years without a impact on the interest rate. So sort of in, the worst of all worlds, right? We would be able to restructure this and refund it in 9, 10 years, kind of at the worst. Other questions? Do you want me to get into some of the other issues about what if you join the interlocal cooperative or?
Yeah, that'd be
things
helpful.
like that? Okay. Excuse me, I don't have COVID. I feel like you have to announce that now. I'm just getting over a sinus infection. So. I need a button. Don't have COVID. Do have sinus infection.
We got one coming.
Thank you. So one of the other things, thank you so much. I appreciate that. One of the other things that has been discussed is whether or not it makes sense to wait and participate with the interlocal cooperative that's being discussed to be set up down here, and whether or not that would benefit you from an interest rate perspective. And it's a great answer of it all depends, right? Well, what it depends on, and you'll have to put your own weight on what you think would be likely to happen. In an interlocal cooperative, we worked on the financing for the Dixie Center. My business partner covers St. George City. And years ago, I actually worked on the original financing for the Dixie Center, which was done by an interlocal cooperative called WCIA. You may or may not know that, but Washington County and St. George City both said, hey, we really want this conference center, but alone, neither one of them could build the scale that they wanted. So they formed the interlocal cooperative, and then each of them said, okay, we'll pledge X and we'll pledge Y. And I don't, I'm old enough and it was long enough ago. I don't remember the details exactly, but one of them had like sales tax and transient room taxes coming in, and one had franchise fees and whatever they pledged, right, to support this debt. And so there, because their credit ratings are about the same, it was, I could look them both in the eye and say, neither one of you are being hurt or neither one of you are effectively being helped by joining this cooperative because you're on the same ground effectively, right? So here, the research I've done, St. George City's sales tax revenue bonds are rated AA+, a straight AA, by Standard & Poor's. And your last publicly offered sales tax bond was rated A+ by Standard & Poor's. So that's a differential in my land of 2 notches. Ratings go from AAA down to triple B. And within each of those, with the exception of AAA, it's like when you were in grade school. There's AAA, it's all on its own. Then there's AA plus, AA, AA minus, A plus, A, A minus, right? So if you're an A plus and they're a AA, then they're above you by 2 rating notches. I've worked on several transactions with interlocal cooperatives, and the rating agencies, notwithstanding, it makes me crazy. They don't care. It makes me crazy. They will, in an interlocal cooperative structure, unless it is structured with what's called joint and severability. I'm massacring the legal terminology. Unless the obligation is joint and several, meaning that all of you agree kind of to sing kumbaya, that if St. George doesn't come to the table with their full payment, you'd back it up. If you don't come to the table with, your full payment, they would back it up. Unless that interlocal is structured so that it's joint and several, the rating agencies will rate to the weakest link, notwithstanding that they will be the largest animal, so to speak, in the room, right? They'll rate generally to the weakest link, because what they're trying to say is, what is the likelihood of default on these bonds? They're not trying to say what is the likelihood that 10% is going to default, right? They're trying to say what's the likelihood of default on these bonds. So if it is not joint and several, then they will rate to the weakest link, and actually it may negatively impact St. George. Now, what you might get in a benefit is bond purchasers like to buy in big blocks. Their issue would obviously be a lot larger than your issue, right? So we would gain something in terms of block size. So will that sort of completely offset the interest rate differential it might cause for them? I don't know, but again, I don't know the structure. Maybe everyone's like, yay, we'll do joint and several. Then you would be lifted up by them. It's unusual that most interlocals in the state that are created want joint and several. It's like, we're good for our little part, right? We're good for our part, but we don't want to take on their obligations, so to speak. So there would be the benefit of larger block size. I would be surprised if it's done joint and several. So I think that, there probably wouldn't be a lot in terms of rating increase. The bigger concern is one, that Roger has talked about of time delay. I mean, if that were going to be done in 2 weeks, that would be a different question than if it's going to be done in 6 months, right? So that's something worth thinking about. I can't remember your other questions at the moment.
Yeah, we're just wondering what our bond rating is. So you already answered that. So that's good to know. Well, I'm kind of curious on that. Yeah, council, anything else that sticks out?
And just quickly, from my perspective, $600 cash savings on the cost of the project is going to save a lot more money in the financed cost and the guarantee than a slightly better bond rating in some sort of interlocal 6 months from now. Like it's not even close. It's better to do it now. Now, from a political perspective, if you still want to join that interlocal, great. I mean, I don't see as an obstacle. Obviously, I'm not the entity. That's some prospective interlocal. But my assumption is, why wouldn't that to be created later interlocal want you guys as a member of that, even if you've already jumped ahead and done a project? I mean, if anything, being already deployed and having a fiber network would put you in an advantage, I think, in joining that interlocal. But that's not us as an interlocal. That's, I don't know what they want to call it, the Southern Utah Broadband Interlocal, something like that. Well, again, we don't see that as an obstacle. That's not us. That's St. George, Washington, Ivins, and you guys potentially create an interlocal. We'd still say, great, let's do it, but let's not let that prevent us from this opportunity, right?
And one thing that might be of interest, quantitatively, my best estimate today, if you were to join with the interlocal cooperative, and if it was structured in such a way that the rating was higher, that would save you about $6,000 a year. I mean, it's money, but it's not, in the grander scheme of things, it's not a huge needle mover, right? And again, so you have to weigh that against, well, what if it takes longer and costs are higher and interest rates go up, right? And those are things that, well, he's answered the cost. I mean, that one, it sounds like you can check that box off. I believe that there's more pressure on interest rates to go higher than lower, but it doesn't mean they couldn't stay the same.
And I don't want to say like, if we aren't ready to move forward, that thing 6 front now isn't good. I think it's still excellent. This is more better.
The rate of construction deployment, whatever you can call it, how long until we can offer it to every home in the city?
So contractually, we put a 2-year time frame from the time of closing of the financing to the build out. From a practical perspective, we're expecting to be done about 8 months from closing. So we
For the entire city?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a very big city. We build about 2,000 to 3,000 homes a month right now is our construction capacity spread across about 6 different cities. And so we'd put, 500 homes per month of construction capacity in the city, and that would get it done in about 6 months. Now there's a couple months of engineering. We had a little frustration, like we just closed on Syracuse in September, and there's not a lot of construction moving yet. And they're like, hey, what happened? We signed this deal. And it's like, there's a massive amount of like engineering and permitting and all this stuff that's flying, and we're about to do groundbreaking there. And that would happen as well here. You'd say, okay, approved. And we're ordering stuff, we're engineering, be a couple of months, but then the construction starts after a couple of months. And like I said, we expect maybe 6 to 8 months of construction, and we'd probably be done. Now, contractually put 2 years in there because we may have, a canal that's holding us up and we've got a permit, or there's some sort of crossing or hold up. And so that happens. So we might have a pocket here or there that might be held up for another 6 months or so. It may not all be completed on the same day, but the current plan would have us start and just basically crank through the whole city and light it up after about 8 to 10 months.
And if we wait and go in with the other cities, that's longer.
It's a lot longer. I mean, we're planning 3 years construction minimally for St. George alone. And so if we're kind of putting you into a larger bucket of St. George, Washington, Santa Clara, and Ivins, there's going to be a lot of arm wrestling about who goes first and what footprints get into what part of the schedule. So yeah, certainly from a timing perspective, there's an advantage of not being part of the interlocal.
That's kind of what I've been thinking, is we would control our own destiny and not be hanging at the end of the tail St. George's wagon.
I mean, the discussions around a St. George area interlocal started 5 years ago for context. Yeah. I mean, I was surprised. I look at my calendar and I'm like, wow, it really has been 5 years.
And it could finish behind the Lake Powell pipeline. Possibly.
Right behind.
Yeah, right behind.
One new thing I learned today in our meeting was the number of providers we'll have here. Can you address council on that, and like how many you think will jump on and use it to give our
I know we'll have at least 5. I expect we'll have at least 10. And what I mean is that Utopia has 15 providers on the system right now. And really what happens is someone goes on and they log in, they put their address in to see if they want services. And it pops up and says, great, you're eligible for services. Here's your options. It has different speeds, 250 meg, gig, whatever. And we have the ability to customize that on a per market basis. So we can say, okay, in Santa Clara, residents can pick from these providers. So we go to those providers and say, hey, who wants in? And we've asked like, hey, St. George area, it may start with just Santa Clara. Who's in? Who wants these subscribers? And we went to our largest service providers and asked them, and they all said yes. And that was kind of the top 3 or 4. One of them is already here, local InfoWest. They didn't actually respond. I think they're kind of, this is good and bad for them. I mean, they partner with us, but then in some ways they see this as competitive to them because they're used to getting 100% of the money from a subscriber that they have wirelessly. Whereas on a fiber subscriber, there's a wholesale piece that we get and a retail piece that they get. So they're still kind of a little bit in limbo whether they participate or not. But we absolutely would have X-Mission and Sumo Fiber and a few others here offering services and competing. And we expect that probably 5 or more would say yes. Their incremental cost is nothing. I mean, they basically say, well, I may occasionally have to send a technician down there, or maybe I already have a technician down there, because some of them are local. And we even have some local providers here who are not on Utopia who said, hey, I want in on this thing. And one of them would be Go Fiber. They've expressed interest in being a provider on this. And so that's our goal. We don't want to come in and compete with anybody. We want to build the fiber network and allow the local providers on. We want to bring in additional new providers. But the idea that, hey, we might build this and not have sufficient competition, you don't need to worry about that. We've got a lot of interest. We'll have many providers down here competing, and the price structure will be the same as what we have in North Utah. Like I said, to them, there's no like tariff or anything. Sometimes in telecommunications, you have actual telecom tariffs between regions. For any of those providers that are already on our network, they are already on board, and this is just one additional customer for them at the same price structure and cost as a customer in any of our other cities. We already span a pretty big area. I mean, we go from Payson up to Tremont in our Wasatch Front cities. But we are also the operator of the Idaho Falls fiber network, and some of the providers have chosen to extend up to that network. And we've also just done a partnership with Bozeman, Montana. And so several of them are going all the way up there. And it's like, well, this is closer than Bozeman. This is actually easier for them to offer services on than Bozeman. So we're in good shape. Lots of providers on the system. They're all really good rated, and you can look them up and see how they are on like Google ratings and things. And that's another thing we look at. Like, well, who are we up against? You got TDS and CenturyLink, and they are the 2 lowest rated. If you look at Google ratings, they're at 2 stars and below. And the Utopia service providers are the top. You can see 4, 4.5, even higher ratings. They're very popular, very good providers. People will be really excited to upgrade when we get them here.
And I may have to buy a condo over here instead of somewhere else.
I mean, we get a lot of people that move, they call us of like, I'm buying a house in the area. Where do you have fiber? And they make decisions based on that availability. And we didn't used to see that 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but nowadays it's critical. I mean, you come down and you can barely function with your broadband. And so finding a place where you can get fiber is a big deal.
My nephew was one of those that called you and said, I'm buying a house here. Can you get here?
Maybe you don't want all that growth. You have enough growth.
And can you address where the fiber goes in our roads? Is it in sidewalks? Is it?
So, I mean, there are fiber providers that do things like micro trenching that we don't like. We are cities, and we like to do this construction the way cities like it to be done. So we put it in the utility easement where it should go, and that's not in the street. It's off to the side. And so we do directional boring, and so that gets drilled. So we don't, we dig a hole and then we drill between the holes. And so that minimizes the impact to the surface and landscaping and other utilities, but it's also not even in the street, except for where we need to do a street crossing. So we'll do street crossings occasionally, but we're not trenching or cutting through the street. It's boring underneath the street. And the only time we impact the actual street surface is if we are crossing another utility. You have to cut a little hole and vacuum out and actually inspect that utility while you're drilling past it, just to make sure you don't hit it. That's anybody doing that type of work has to do that. But the big difference is a lot of companies are doing micro trenching, and that does severely damage the roads. And some of these recent partnerships we've done, like Pleasant Grove, the mayor there has a background in construction, and he's like, we're doing Utopia fiber because those other guys are going to destroy our roads. And that was a primary reason they picked us. And so that's something to be aware of. So you'll get a 1.25 inch conduit or multiple installed and pulled in through drilling on the side of the roads. And then the drops to the house, basically it's similar, but it's smaller equipment where it's considered a missile bore. And that's where it's just a little, it's not an explosive missile. It's just like a metal piston type thing that vibrates, and it kind of finds its way under the ground. And so they dig a hole by the house and they dig a hole out by the box where our fiber is. And that goes under their sprinkler lines. So they go deep enough to stay underneath and avoid other utilities, and they pop that up. So we can go under sidewalks, go under driveways, and it doesn't disturb the landscaping or the flowers, except right where we dig the holes. You know, we do our best to, replace sod and flowers or whatever may be there. And we have a really good reputation for that. So we do like to send you to referrals of other cities to say, like, how was it? Did they do a good job? And, regularly they say, this is the best we've had in our city. They come back, they fix things. If they break a sidewalk panel, they'll rip it out and replace it with new concrete. If they break and damage things, we fix it. We're not perfect. It is a big construction project, but we do video through the entire city, every sidewalk, every way that we impact, so that we can go back and say, hey, this is, it's worse than what we captured in video. We'll fix it. And we kind of do that on both sides. Sometimes people say, hey, you cracked my driveway. And we're like, no, it was broken before. We have proof. It's amazing what people think we impact when, we go down their street. But it's good. It's clean. It's, from a city perspective, it's the best infrastructure. It's hardened. Our facilities have 24/7 capability to stay up and running, even in power outage. We put standby generators connected to natural gas as opposed to fuel tanks. That's not battery backup. I mean, if you have a extended power outage, you don't have those in this city because I've heard you've got really good power, but all the other providers are on batteries and that's it. So if you have 8 hours or longer power outage, your internet's gone. Ours isn't that way. It'll run indefinitely because of the generator backup and the battery backup at our facilities. And the intent is to connect those diversely with fiber, so that even a fiber cut won't take out anything unless it's just the last connection to the house. So it's a, I don't know how to describe it, but it's a far more hardened system than even other fiber providers build. So there's, DSL, and then cable is a small step above that. And then there's typical fiber, and then Utopia fiber builds to the highest standards.
I have a finance question. Can we go back to that for a second? We have a 40% take rate to support the bond payment.
Yes.
So if we end up with a 60% rate or whatever that might be, anything in excess of the 40% take rate,
Right.
How does that get accounted for to the city? I mean, normally, I understand you have a 8 to 9 year callable option on the bond, but outside of that, if the take rate is high enough that we could, and I know it's not our bond, but you theoretically would repay the bond faster, how does that get accounted for to the city so that we can make sure we're capitalizing on the higher take rate?
Well, the nice thing for you is that once you agree to this service contract, if you choose to adopt that service agreement, then the service agreement is structured such that it will, take care of that 40% take rate. However, if you have a 60% take rate, there's additional cost. The good news for you is they're not going to come back knocking at your door. That's on them.
Yeah. So we say this is a $6.7 million project, but it's a $6.7 million project if we get 40% take rate. If we get 60% take rate, it's a $7.5 million project or something like that, right? There's a lot of additional cost, installations, more electronics and equipment. We finance all the additional installations and subscribers and all that other stuff. Now you say, well, yeah, but there's new revenue. Like, well, yeah, but we're underwater for quite a while, probably 5 years or more on that additional cost, and then using the additional revenues to pay that. It's like, hey, that's great. We'll finance that. We say, but then after that 5 years, we'll have upside, right? Well, the problem is then you build a bunch of new houses and then we have to go, expand the city, and then we get more installations. And so as we've looked at these historically, we're like, even at higher take rates, there's really not like a big cash upside. It just becomes more financing and more revenue to cover that financing. And all of that lives in general UIA financing versus a city backstop financing. If sometime 10, 15, maybe 20 years down the road, we find UIAs in a position like, hey, this is great. We've financed all this additional, and there's lots and lots of new revenues. we might be in a position to pay off bonds early. But that's pretty low on the waterfall, right? It's like what we've seen more is we're having to reinvest and finance back into these cities as they grow and expand. And the nice thing is, like she says, we never come back to the city and say, hey, you've got to pay for that or guarantee something. What we do offer though is it's like, hey, if we find ourselves in a position to lower the cost of services, we will, and you'll get that benefit, just like all of the other cities. And collectively, we're in a really good financial position to do that, at least not increase the cost of services. In fact, we haven't had to increase the cost of services for over 10 years, which has been great because even labor and inflation and other things would have normally caused us to increase the price. We haven't had to. And that's the result of economy of scale and growth and take rate beyond what we needed and revenues beyond what we have, to cover debts. So there's an upside to the city with additional revenue, but it's not in the form of paying off the bond early. It's more in the general cost savings and maintaining a lower cost of service to residents. But that's not to say that we won't be coming back in 10 to 15 years or so and say, hey, we're in a position, let's do both. Let's lower the cost of service and pay off some of these bonds. And if we are able to pay off bonds, then obviously your obligations goes away. And so that's kind of low on the waterfall. So we don't have a contractual guarantee to say when and if that happens. But we do have the goal to do that. And that's kind of done collectively. Like we've got about $330 million of bonds that are somewhere in the line of being paid off. It'll all be paid off before this one ever is. And so there will be benefit probably to the city collectively far before it would ever on an individual project basis. And a lot of our revenues, a lot of that upside isn't even related to fiber to the home projects. I mean, we like fiber to the home. That's kind of our purpose. But we have subscribers and partnerships in over 50 cities across the state, even partnerships outside of the state that generate a lot of revenue. And that puts us in a really good position to lower the cost of services, pay off debts, reinvest back in the system, above and beyond any individual city guarantee or bucket of revenue and debt and expenses.
Any other questions?
I've just, Jarrett, first, thank you. This was awesome, what you sent us. Just as a note, you went out, our sales taxes increased on average 10.112% per year over the last 10 years. And that's 2 years that were negative. So I would anticipate, even at these numbers, we look really good. And I just, again, on the new subdivisions, you answer the timing of this. I guess the process, if for a resident, this gets ran in 8 months, 10 months, we've got it ready to go, and I want to call and get fiber into the house.
I mean, maybe I should say 2 years or less.
2 years or less, and that's fine. But what's the process for a resident of Santa Clara now to get fiber to their home?
Yeah, so we'll be harassing everybody through marketing, good harassment. So, they'll get flyers, they'll do updates. We love to come and do events in the park and town halls and things like that to let people know about it. We kind of want the city to feel like it's your responsibility to market this at the same time we take responsibility too. And that way we kind of double up on it because people need to know about this to sign up. Once the service is available, like we've built it to their house, they can, they'll get a flyer and then we also release those to the service providers. So the service providers know the addresses and they start, sending. Very few of them do any sort of door-to-door marketing. That's very rare. But usually they'll do flyers. They'll sponsor their own events. We've had one provider that likes to do hot air balloon rides and things like that. And so people will find out about
a hot air balloon ride.
Okay, we'll get to sign up. And so once they can sign up, it's like great, and they can log in to our website. They can chat with us online and have someone help them online. They can call us. But essentially it pops up, it's a shopping cart where it says, great, you can get services. You sign up for $30 a month with us for the fiber connection. And then you pick your service provider. And that's anywhere from about $35 to $50, depending on if it's gigabit or 250 megabit service, or even 10 gig is going to be available to every house in the city. which is the fastest in the country, by the way. We're very proud of that. And so those options pop up and you can pick your provider and pick your speeds. You can add in phone service and video if you want. Most people just kind of go with YouTube TV or Fubo or something like that, since Fubo's got jazz games on it now. And so, you kind of have this little shopping cart. Now, when you sign up, there's no installation cost. So it's basically you commit to 1 month of service. And if you don't like it, you cancel and you're not out anything. So there's no term contracts. There's no cancellation fees. You're on the hook for $65. And we used to have contract terms and realized that nobody would ever cancel. They love it. It's awesome. There's no reason to cancel. So we just said, why have this barrier of entry? And why have these obligations? And even with no obligation in contract, we have less than 3% churn, which is phenomenal. It's best in the industry. And so, and that's the rate that people cancel annually. And so we're confident in our product and people sign up. It's really easy to sign up. It does take a little time. Okay, so back to the process. It's easy to sign up. But the problem is you don't just sign up and then go plug into it. So what happens is a scheduling process. It's a 2-step installation. The first step is that we schedule, and we actually will call and talk to the contact that submitted the information and say, hey, when can we get on your schedule to have someone come and do the conduit installation to the house is the first step. And then the second step is the fiber installation and the device in the house gets placed. So the first one doesn't need to have anybody there. They can dig the 2 holes and run the conduit under the ground with that missile process. But then that final installation, someone needs to be in the house and then they'll run the fiber up into the house and install a little device inside and usually wall mount it. And then that plugs into your consumer router, just your little Wi-Fi router usually. And we've got some recommendations for those because if you're running a 10-year-old router, it's not going to keep up with fiber. So you do need to have a decent router. And like I said, we got recommendations. Some of the providers offer that as an incentive. You can, provide one for it if you want. And so they hook it up. They'll run a speed test right there. So we record after the installation, we get a speed reading off of it just to verify it's working at full speed. And we record that. And then we give them a little welcome packet with red vines and a blanket and some goodies and a referral card. Seems a little silly, but it's actually kind of fun and people love it. And so we do it. And the best reference we get is people telling other people. They'll talk at it at the kids' sports games with their neighbors. They'll talk about it in church. They'll talk about it, around. And it's like, and Facebook's been awesome for us because almost every neighborhood has a little Facebook group. And they're like, hey, there's this Utopia thing. What do you guys think? And we love it because their neighbors speak volumes. They're just like, we love it. Utopia is the best. This is what our experience was like. And we know that, and we know we got to do a good job if we're going to get those referrals. And that helps a lot to get the word out. But
And as a user, once that process is done, you can switch between service providers with a phone call. After that, you don't have to have, provider A come out and tromp through your home again and provider B take stuff out and send boxes back or whatever. I don't want to use them. I want to use service provider B, and they don't have to come into your home anymore.
yeah, just flip the switch, essentially.
And I can cancel that cloud that I have over my house,
Yes.
send it away.
Yes, you can. I was fortunate enough to be one of I'm not sure I was technically a beta tester, but I was very early on. Utopia Fiber, it's in Murray City, has been for a long time. I have a gig to my house. I have faster speeds at my home than I do in my office in downtown Salt Lake. And then I come down here and my kids are like, why is the service so slow?
All right.
But it's beautiful
On the
here.
agenda.
We love it here.
I did want to say that just listening on there's, in my opinion, there's no reason to join in with any other city. They can come on later. It just,
I don't see any reason.
no, I don't either.
Especially with the
interest rates are so
explanations on-
good. The interest rate alone is going to,
I think we've modeled, what we did is we took the rates that we were able to get for Syracuse, and then we added 15 basis points for the differential, how the market has moved. And it'll take me a minute to, fire it back up. But I think interest rate, we were assuming, in my industry, we refer to it as the TIC, the true interest cost. It's a weighted average cost. It does not take into account the cost of issuance. But the true interest cost was like a 285, 282 in that neighborhood somewhere. We finance these typically over 27 years. 2 years of capitalized interest so that you don't have any payments coming due while they're out building and getting subscribers on, right? And they're getting ahead of the game in terms of that revenue coming in. And then we amortize the principal over 25 years.
So in the numbers we cranked back in June, we kind of went back and checked with her, like, are we still good with this? Because we put some headroom in that. But really your obligation is tied to whatever terms we get at financing. And she's like, yeah, we're still good based on these rates that we ran plus the additional basis points. But say we do get the same rate as Syracuse, then that would be the obligation. So, we think even if it was the maximum amount we put out there and it ends up being the maximum amount in the contract, we're still very confident in getting those numbers. But the likelihood is that we come in somewhere below that. There's a little bit of buffer room. Every customer we don't have to get or be obligated to is benefit. There's also opportunities for revenues. We've got a couple schools out being bid right now with Utah Education Telehealth Network. We're kind of looking to see if this looks good. If you guys are planning to vote on this soon, we would go ahead and bid on those schools, assuming that we do the project. Getting a couple schools on the network is really good in two ways. One is revenues right out of the gate. And it's also really good politically, right? To be, to have an upgrade to those schools facilitated by the city fiber project. That's awesome. And so we'd love to get that political and financial win. And so we're, unless you guys wave us off or something, we're going to plan on bidding those schools. And that's not a guarantee that we win them, but we did win more than anyone else last year. So knock on wood.
And just to verify, the interest cost we're using currently is a 282 true interest cost. With all the cost of issuance built in, it's a 290. Oh goodness, I need new glasses. 294 is what we're assuming. Now that may move a little bit. I won't bore you to tears unless someone really has a penchant for finance, but municipal bonds are issued frequently at a premium. And so you'll see coupon rates of like 4% and 3% or whatever, because bond buyers like to buy with a premium. What that means is that they're paying more than 100 cents on the dollar up front. So what I'm quoting you is your effective rate. So to give you an idea, the par amount that we've modeled here is about 6.3 million. And that delivers enough for him to build 6.7 million plus pay the cost of issuance, plus the capitalized interest, plus a reserve fund if we needed one. And that's because the bond purchasers are paying more than 100 cents on the dollar. Does that make sense? Probably doesn't, but if you want to know more, I can tell you more.
She was nodding her head.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Did you notice we were all looking?
Yes, okay. Okay,
We
good.
got it.
We all have our skill sets up here. Well, I heard a couple of put it on the agenda.
I think we're ready.
Put it on the agenda, bro.
Yeah. How do we get a seat at the table, Roger?
Ongoing conversations. In the meeting earlier today, it was kind of like, well, the original cities have kind of been under the attitude until the original project is completed that they didn't want other cities coming in and influencing things around. And we're about 6 months out from completing all of the last areas. I mean, West Valley City is an enormous city. So that one's going to get wrapped up early next year. And that'll be the end. We basically say, okay, put a bow on it. The original UIA project of, 9 cities plus, there was 11 cities in Utopia, and all of those cities will be 100% built out and completed, and we're done. And now the only thing that we're doing now is new city partnerships. And at that point, there's no opportunity for a city to come in and say, hey, put my city on top of, the priority list above the original cities, because they're all done. So I honestly believe that we'll make some progress on that. But since we're not there yet, they basically said, no way, not until we're done. So, and the response to the other cities, because this comes up, with we have Morgan, West Point, Clearfield, Syracuse, and Pleasant Grove, all as partner cities without a board membership at Utopia or UIA. And it's like, well, what do you guys want out of board membership? Well, we want to say, okay, come to the meetings. We'll let you speak. We'll let you speak on any topic. We value you. We'll send you our reports. We'll send, you're here and participating in every way we can come up with other than from the legal membership identification on an official vote. That we hope comes, but again, I'm not the board. That's not my say. I could just say there's been reluctance that seems primarily based on history where we did have cities fighting over who gets to go first, right? And now that is going to go away because we'll be done. And so I would make a recommendation that we do allow additional memberships. Obviously, if you partnered with us on a fiber to the home project, I don't see any downside to that, but it ultimately is the decision of the board members of the other cities.
Can we-
I'll buy the chair if you'll let Councilman Waite sit at that table. You want Councilman Waite at that table.
And I was going to put in a plug to say, since we're the first Southern Utah city that's going, potentially going to-
Washington already has a seat though, right?
Actually, you're right, at Utopia, but not UIA. So,
but potentially, if we go down this path,
I think we'd be in
as
pretty
the
good shape.
first Southern Utah city. That
Sometimes it's
has
more fun to sit in the
live-
back and throw tomatoes at the board.
And I've heard those meetings aren't very exciting either.
they are.
At least you would understand them.
That's true.
Awesome. Thank you.
You heard, put it on the agenda. So whatever we need to get to him to get it on the agenda. I think you've got the draft agreement, right?
We have I believe we have the draft agreement.
You have the draft there. You've got blanks in there, so we'll fill in the numbers but fortunately we won't have to change the numbers. So the presentation numbers and all that we can feed in there, and we may, we like, do we need any more buffer for financing purposes? So might be some minor.
I always like to put some buffer in,
So, I mean,
just to be cautious.
so we have a regular meeting. We can make a decision next week, a week from tonight. Otherwise, our next meeting wouldn't be till December 9th.
So
Right.
if we're basing it on the current price structure, I would really like to get this done next week.
Okay.
It's not fair to our
Yeah.
vendors to come at them late December and be like, here's, millions of dollars worth of orders right before the price structure changes. So, they've asked for a little bit of heads up. And so I think we'd really want to get it nailed down next week if possible. I would love to be here just for any last minute questions. I can't be, I have a conflict. We'll make sure that somebody from Utopia is here, but feel free to reach out with any emails or phone calls, whatever. I'd be happy to respond. Or text me on my cell number. I know I finally got you in my contact, so it doesn't show up as spam. So, but email usually works probably the best.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I can't be here either, but I could have a colleague of mine here as well. I've got other
Before then.
work travel already.
Next week we'll do it.
I mean, typically all the questions come out in the work session and then the city council meeting. It's
Just send Jason.
Okay, will do.
all right. Well, thank you.
Okay.
Anything else for us?
I don't think so. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your time.
You bet.
Thanks.
Okay, back to Gary. Mutual aid agreement for Rocky Mountain. You can switch it over in 10 minutes or less, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna hold you to it, so.
Well, I'll make it 2 minutes.
No, not the discussion. I'm switching the city power from the St. George feeder to the Rocky Mountain feeder
Oh,
in 2 minutes or less.
I don't know about that.
Okay, 10.
Okay. It's in the packet. There's called a One Utah Mutual Assistance Agreement. We do not currently have an agreement with UAMPS for mutual aid. We do currently have one with the IPSA. I don't know if you're familiar with the IPSA group. IPSA is Intermountain Power Superintendents Association. That's the group that does our testing for our apprentices, for the lineman, substation, and metering apprentices. So all the cities that are members of the IPSA to test their linemen and to train their linemen. We have an agreement with them for mutual aid. So all the local cities right here are members of it. So we do have an agreement with them for mutual aid. If there's an emergency, natural disaster, something that causes power outage, we can help each other. This is an agreement with Rocky Mountain Power. We've never had one with them. I don't know if we want to read it over I'm not going to read over the whole thing. We'll probably I've sent it to Matt Hentz, and he's going to have time to look over it. So it's pretty straightforward. If we have an emergency, we can call on any of the members of this agreement. On the last few pages, it shows some members that have already signed up. So if we do have an emergency, we can call on them for help with manpower, equipment, or materials, and vice versa. If somebody needs our help, we would be agreeing to send our guys. Or
So the names that are in the agreement, Morgan City, Manti, South Utah Valley Electric, those are the ones that have already signed up?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know why their information isn't on this, but they're,
Moon Lake, Arcane, Dixie.
yeah.
Where's Raft River?
Probably over in Colorado. Probably a co-op like Dixie.
Yeah. There's on the front, the very first page, it's the, I don't know how you pronounce it, Eureka. It's the Utah Rural Electric Cooperative Association. So some of the members of that will be on this as well. So you got Rocky Mountain Power, Eureka, and then the public owned utilities, which would be us.
I see no reason why we wouldn't want to be in a cooperation with those and with Utah Power.
I don't either.
I don't-
Transmission lines are mostly theirs.
Yeah. I've never seen one with Rocky Mountain Power before, and I mean, I think it's good. We've got their resources.
Well, it's got Dixie on there too.
Yeah. So I'll have Matt look over this. I'm sure it's all sound, but we'll just have Matt look over it before we bring it back and get an approval for it. Any questions on it?
Just so I'm understanding correctly, so if we did call for help, we would still pay them for that help.
Yes.
It's not just a handout if someone calls us.
No, this section on page.
Yeah.
Is it the same with the fire side? Do you get a bill from St. George if we show up and help them? Okay, so it's different here in mutual aid.
Article 3.
This one can help you though in a disaster. If you've got this agreement in place prior to the disaster, then you can get it reimbursed from FEMA, or if they have public assistance money comes available and you've got this agreement in place prior to the disaster, it can help.
Gotcha.
And that's probably when you're going to use this.
Yeah, if it qualifies for FEMA aid. Page 2 does show the payment structure. I mean, we'd reimburse them for the labor and material, whatever material, maybe truck time.
And
So,
they
yeah.
reimburse us the same way.
Same way.
Reciprocal, so.
I'm a big fan of mutual aid agreements.
I think especially the smaller utilities really benefit from it. If we have a big disaster, we don't have the manpower, maybe some of the trucks or equipment that we need to get it back
I'm sure.
online in a timely manner. So it's really beneficial to smaller utilities like us to be members of a mutual aid. The bigger utilities like St. George City, they've got 30 guys. We've got 4.
There's a way.
So if we have a strong windstorm, we get 5 or 6 poles blown down. It's going to take us a couple days maybe to get it all back up. So it really benefits the smaller utilities. Okay, any other questions?
There's a jury waiver, Article 15D. We just want to make sure Matt looks at that, or that your insurance looks at that. Make sure they're okay with it. And it's in bold capital text, which kind of,
Yeah.
okay. Put it back on an agenda, Gary.
Okay.
Have Matt look at it.
Yeah. Before I'll get with Matt before we'll try to get it on the agenda for next week. Okay, thanks, Mayor and Council.
Thank you. First quarter fiscal year 2022 financial review. Brock is filling in for Debbie. Right?
I'll be doing this time frame. Do I have a time frame?
Yeah.
The same time.
You're the
frame
one
Wendell
that,
gave.
you're the one that promised me this would be a quick meeting.
35 minutes. I thought for sure by 7. That power department just is racking up the time.
If you just put these in colors, it'd be a lot quicker. Green's good, red, no.
You take all the time you need, Brock.
I'll be quick. First quarter ended in September, so we're going to run through the first quarter financials. First sheet, summary of the revenues and expenditures. So looking as a comparison to the 2021 fiscal year to 2022, you can see a lot of the expenditures really or revenue within about $32,000 from last year to this year. Taxes are up a bit. The licenses and permit is really where it's down. That has your building permit fees, and so building permits to this date are down compared to last year for the first quarter. Because the other part of that is your animal licenses and business licensing, which comes in the third quarters when we'll see those in January, February, and people get those. So building permits is what's.
So is the first quarter of 2021 an anomaly?
For building permits?
Building permits and licenses.
Well, I mean, I don't want to say it's just when things, I mean, I don't.
A bunch of multifamily
Yeah.
permits taken out.
I didn't look back to see who was pulling them at that time, but it's possible. I mean, it could have been a time of Arcadia, Ocotillo, all pulling things at that time. Those were the big developments that we had going at that time. So on multifamily type. So, but they kind of come in a run. I mean, there's a little bit of.
Sure.
We also had run last year. Towards the end of the year, Desert Village came in. They pulled a lot of permits, and a lot of. I mean, they pulled those sixplexes. They come in and pulled 5 of them, so 30 units at one time. So
We'll get that when Austin
Which desert?
pulls all his over here.
yeah, Heritage Point gets going. We'll see.
Pull west.
So
When I asked about.
Mhm.
The transient room tax is where?
it's under taxes. So this year, to date on transient room tax, it gets into a little bit more specifics in the detail, but transient room tax was 52,000, which is actually at 45% of what we budget. We budgeted at 114,000. We collected at 52,000.
What was it last year?
Last year total,
No, first quarter.
first quarter. TRT was, I'm gonna have ballpark 613, 22, about 24,000.
So what did you say this year's was? 45?
52. So
So it's
at
up
least
significant.
that's, yeah. So in the numbers here, July, August, and September of last year, July was 6,200, August 7,400, and September was 9,600. In the spreadsheet here, we have July this year at 12,200, August showed at 27,800, and September at 12,000.
And that's not just us, right?
No, we just get us.
That's just us?
We don't, there's nothing sheriff throughout the state. It's what's done.
Why the difference?
Well, it's
More
got
travel, more
Arcadia
people.
coming online and
More Arcadia, more Ocotillo.
No,
Oh.
the 12, 27, 12.
So and you have to look at the month, so you're behind. So when we received July really was for May. They would have collected it in May, remitted to the state in June. We got it in July. So
August.
September would be July.
I mean, I'm just wondering why that 27 is twice.
I'll have to go and look. I can dig back in and look.
That's just curious.
You know,
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm just like, why?
So, but I can, you know, same things that you look at, and I, just a little blip here though, like the local option tax, highway tax. July was 10, August jumped to 16, September went back down to 9,700. So there was a bump there.
So it may just be a reporting thing.
It could be. So
Thank you.
you have some
Our sales tax,
entities are report on could be a monthly, quarterly, semi-annual or annual basis. And so it could be some that on that July, they're an annual basis based on their revenues and what they do. So
What's sales tax doing during those same two?
It's crazy. Same trend.
Yeah.
I think that's just Southern Utah is so busy.
So we went,
You just further back in his thing.
Yeah, I just scroll to the bottom.
you went July 126,000 to August 185,000 and September 113, which let me put my back to the thing we talked about, the census. Though if our census number was still at 8,400 or more of what we thought it was, those numbers are all, I mean, that 185 could have been 200,000.
Are we on that? Are we
I
not
think
getting
No.
anything on it?
No,
so
we're
many
down.
communities that feel like they've been shorted by the census, but
We're contesting that, right?
nobody has any appeal.
January, we can start the appeal. So,
Okay.
so,
Tell them they're not.
But yeah.
Fiber if they don't fix that.
so, and then, you know,
We won't send them up.
And that was the same with the transient room tax.
That's a reporting.
so there's
Got it.
our revenue, revenue is pretty similar to the last fiscal year. So Swiss days, you can see Swiss days in 2021, we didn't do any revenue. We didn't, any sponsors, anything that way. So you look at this year at 23,000 from hosting Swiss days and sponsors and vendors and everything that took place with Swiss days. So that puts us at roughly pretty flat, 2% less than the previous fiscal year.
Yeah, but
You go to the expenditures. Our expenditures, actually, so we're down 9%. So revenue to expenditures, expenditures exceeded revenue by just over $2,000 for the first quarter, which, actually the mayor asked me a little bit about that earlier today. I said, I feel that's really quite good. Where our largest revenue stream, our second largest revenue stream is property tax. And we're not going to see that for another, month, 2 months. And so, to be where we are, I feel like that's a
Every tax just
pretty good spot. If you compare also to last year, we were $116,000, $117,000. So I think we're doing good. That's revenue's up. It's also to directors, staff of, being fiscally responsible with our expenditures and budgeting. So, but through that, a couple of, we talked about on our taxes where we are. Most of those are up. Just the highway sales tax at 31% of budget.
Why is the police so different between the two quarters on expenditures?
Yeah.
The police, it's a timing issue on the payment to Ivans. Debbie made the payment just into October, and
Okay.
it's a different little bit of counting with and how Debbie did, and sometimes I would do it. A lot of times I'd go make that journal entry. I'd go make the journal entry and put it into September, so it was in there, and then I just reverse it back out. So when it came to do the financials, you could see it, and that's one that can be done, but you'll see it in the next quarter. So,
Okay.
but so we have some though, in our charges for services. I see a little bit of an uptick there. If you look at our zoning and subdivision fees, and that's also kind of a guess of what's going to happen. We budgeted 12,000, and we've collected 11,600 to date. So some of those happened. Heritage Square use fees, it's not a big one, but we didn't know how much already was going to get used. We've exceeded that budget. As here at the city office, so not much. We haven't had anything's happening here. One that always surprises me also about every year late for the last number of years though is the sale of cemetery plots. We sell cemetery plots.
How many?
I would love to come back. I can ask Brad to talk to him one time what our non-residential rate is. Make sure that I know we increased it a while ago, but sometimes I think about increasing again to make sure that I want to say those, make sure our residents here are.
Bradley,
Getting
what's
those
the
plots.
percentage resident, non-resident?
Really?
50-50? 50% of our cemetery plot sales are to non-residents?
Really?
And I would like to.
They argue and they fight, but we still charge them if they don't live in the city.
Aren't they like 1,200 and the residents 600?
Yeah, I believe the residents 550 and the non-residents 1,200. We kind of doubled the price of 2012, I guess, quite a while ago.
I mean, for me, I wouldn't mind seeing that go up. 1,800, 2,000. We want these plots. I mean, personally, I think that's what you want them for our residents of Santa Clara. So, I'd mind if you guys are all right. I think that is just crazy. And our cemetery's filling up.
Yeah, say, where's your expandable area?
On the downhill side of the old section,
On the
towards the
slope?
highway.
On the hill?
I can get
So
it
they're just temporary plots.
Actually, you're gonna move it into Tober Farm, right?
along Highway 18.
those.
I can get 1,000 more in there.
And you can be buried kind of on a vertical
You're kidding,
with a
right?
view, looking over the road.
Yeah, he's kidding. How many more have you got?
We're between 500 and 600 right now. We're selling, I don't know, 10 a week at least.
Yeah, I sign about 10 a week or more.
So what really is our plan for additional space?
Well, we had talked about trying to get the land next to
school
Goobler for
district?
the school district and get that 10 acres there and use it for a sports field / cemetery as we needed it. But there is some area by the Veterans Monument along the old section there where I could probably get 1,000 plots in there with some excavation and just kind of smooth that out. But I haven't talked to engineers, so. But that's the only room we have.
We've got Tober Park. You could plant them in between the trees down there.
Maybe we could do that.
Have to alert the plow. Oh, man.
We plant more than trees. Huh?
That's in part of your discussion for the budget retreat, right? Your cemetery expansion?
Sure. I
Absolutely.
have something on my board upstairs to talk about it.
But if you guys are good with maybe raising that rate, non-residential rate.
I think it'd be a good idea.
Put it out on the South Hills, on the way to the shooting range.
Do an RFP.
That's if you're.
In the rock.
So,
We'll stack
all right. We'll run that
What
back.
category, just so I know, which category of revenue does the cemetery plots fall under?
Cemetery goes charges for services.
Okay.
So there's 3 line items. There's the cemetery plot, the perpetual care, and then the internment fee. There's 3 different line items that fall under with the cemetery plots. But sale of cemetery plots was at 58% of what we budgeted. So
Quite a ways down. I think that's where he is right now.
Oh, right
Um,
there.
fines and penalties with the court, 33%. I know that we split that with Ivans City on that revenue. So like I say, the general fund, happy with where we're at through the first quarter. So the expenditures, I will say, some of the things you understand the first quarter, a lot of times with the budget, that's when you might see a lot of expenditures because it's the budget and there's capital equipment. We've also in this one, you're going to see some expenditures that possibly weren't budgeted. They were budgeted in last year and it's just taken 9 months, 10 months to get them here, but a couple big items that are in the budget. We did in the admin, we bought, and we had new server IT wise. The building department did slurry seal, overseal here and at the Clover Patch. We had the streets department. Part of the thing was the street sweeper, along with the stormwater fund, bought a street sweeper. And parks, trails, sports field, new infield groomer for up at Goobler Park. So there's a couple of big ticket items that purchased here in the first quarter, as well as some bond payments that show. So some of that might level out a little bit on the expenditure side as we continue on through the year. But you have through there, you have some graphs and you can see on the revenue side, you can see kind of on the graph where it plays out, where our largest thing taxes and then charges for services. And on expenditures, you can see where our main big ones go. Fire, EMS, administration. So police would be up there with the timing of that being recorded in this quarter. So
Is that fire and EMS really separated a lot better than it was before? I know you'd worked on that.
I believe it is. I think we're doing a much better job of getting expenses where they should be, getting the more truer cost of what it takes to run those departments. The only thing in that is you're looking at wages and benefits that are split 50-50. Except that in the EMS side, you have part-time EMTs and AMTs and paramedics that come and work, and we pay those. On the fire side, we have volunteers, and they aren't paid when they come and work. We just pay them a stipend when they come to training and go on calls. They get a stipend. The others, as on the EMS side, there is actually part-time employees. But if you were to say, I kind of talked, I mean, those are split 50-50. If you were to say, we're not doing EMS anymore, we're just going to do full-time fire, all those wages and benefits that are on that EMS would slide right over into fire. So the only thing you're chaining out if you were not doing EMS is the operating expenses and or capital equipment, those. So those would still stay because you'd still keep your staff. So any questions in regards to the general fund? All right. We'll jump to the water fund. The water fund, we operating revenue is 670,000, and with non-operating revenue, we're at 707,000 or 23.4% of budget. And with operating and non-operating expenditures, it's 543,000. So revenue exceeded expenditures by 164,000. Metered water sales is up from, that's at 31%. Hydrant meter use, it's not a big one, but there's a lot of hydrant meter use going on right now. It's 160% of budget already. So.
Dustin, is it possible to do construction water on the irrigation system? Would it be if we made some changes to it?
It would be expensive, $5,000 or $6,000.
I'm just thinking with Black Desert and Regal and Solace, those areas that are around where that existing line's going to be, if we maybe ought to be thinking about that to where we can sell it to them at the culinary rate and use irrigation water.
Works for me.
Oh, you've got all of those projects right there lined up next to each other, that irrigation line goes right through the heart of all of them. We shouldn't be putting culinary water for dust control.
What do we make up the cost and what do we charge them?
We charge them the same thing we're charging them now. We're just gonna start using secondary water. They pay culinary rate for construction meter. Metered rate. We'll just give them secondary water, same rate. Or they can haul it in from St. George. It's metered, so we'd be able to keep track of our rights.
All right. In that, there's some big, you had the improvements of the South Hills in there. Paid a progressive contracting on the South Hills improvements also. There was purchased a new air compressor in the capital equipment, so. There is one we do have in the water fund right now currently is with the engineers for a master plan, capital facilities plan, and rate analysis is ongoing right now with Sunrise Engineering. So. All right. Jump to the sewer. Sewer fund revenues are at 210,000. Currently, and operating expenditures at 191,000. So revenue exceeded expenditures at 18,000. So you can see a little bit there was, and that's about average. Sewer fund runs pretty flat, pretty lean right there. So. Nothing big expenditure wise, but done in the sewer. They have lease on a backhoe that they share between multiple departments. So there.
Has Jim called you to borrow the track hoe yet? He wants to climb up in it and swing the bucket a time or two now that he's back.
All right, we're gonna spend a little more time on the power fund. Again, power, first quarter, 2.2 million in revenue. Expenditures were at 2.29. So expenditures exceed revenue at $9,300. They did buy a new chipper, one of the big items. But if you look through some of this on the detail, revenue is up for the first quarter. Power sales on the residential side were at 1.7 million, or 48% of budget. So a lot of power was used, a lot of power sold, but on the expenditure side, as was talked about through Mark's presentation, the cost of getting the power, our power purchase through UAMPS was budgeted at 1.5 million, and we've expended 1.2 million in power purchase. So that's at roughly 83%. So there's the revenues coming in, but there is an expense, and some of that cost of buying that power is more than what we're selling it for. So. But. Any questions? They're commercial too. Commercial's up at 36% revenue. So. And last, stormwater. Stormwater, 142,000 in revenue. Expenditures were at 237,000. So expenditures exceeded revenue of 94,000, and that had to do with the street sweeper that came in and just got paid for, but wasn't in this year's budget, was in last year's budget. So we'll have to come with a budget amendment for that one. So, but That's why that street sweeper was 148,000. Other than that, inside the stormwater is nothing expenditure wise. It's really alarming at this time. So, but that was what brought that one stormwater a little out of balance there. So other than that, that's really concludes financials. I think every fund is in a pretty good shape through the first quarter. We do need to make sure we're watching our expenditures throughout, make sure the remainder of the year, the next couple quarters, that we're in a good spot. General fund, as I said, I believe we'll make a budget amendment on that stormwater, which we'll be bringing back one in January. We'll do a mid-year one, as potentially bring one then, as we do talk about our rate adjustments with staff that we bring back. So we do that. We'll bring one back in January. So, any questions or
Questions, council? Thank you, Brock.
You're welcome.
Thank Debbie for us.
Will do.
Staff reports, Bradley.
I wanted to thank council for approving equipment and the new groomer that we got that we're using up at Goobler Park. We had a tournament last weekend, a Rocky Mountain School of Baseball tournament, and I got a compliment today from the owner of SU Baseball, Todd Yates, and he said, I was out at Goobler during the Rocky Mountain School of Baseball tournament. Fields looked very good, and your guys were doing an amazing job between the games. They said they were able to drag every game with the new equipment. You guys have set a bar for excellence. So thank you for the equipment, and the fields are looking really good up there. We had a lot of compliments from the Huntsman senior games up there. Everybody really likes the facilities, and the sports fields crew are working on Spence Gun now. They've redone the infield and they've reseeded the grass. They've taken out the mound, and now we're using a portable mound. And then in December, once we've got 2 more tournaments this year that'll use Little League and Spence Gun. But in December, we plan on taking out the grass on the infields at the Little League and going with portable mounds. That way we can take our grooming machines and we can laser level that down to where it's smooth and perfect to play, a lot more safe, and it'll be more precise for the players. So we're looking forward to doing that. We had movies in the park on Friday night. We had about 150 people attend. It was a perfect evening. The weather was perfect, no wind, and everybody had a real good time. We had some game booths set up. So we started at 6, and right at 7 o'clock, the movie started. It was over at 8:30. Everything was cleaned up, and I didn't hear any complaints from the neighbors for the noise, for the music or the sound or anything, but we had a really good turnout. Wanted to talk just briefly about wreaths across America. That'll be at the Santa Clara Cemetery on December 18th. And also at the end of that, we have 170 wreaths ordered, and we've met the donation requirement for this year for the donations for the 170. So any donations that we get this year will carry over to next year. So it's kind of perpetuating itself. Special thanks to Tony Coleman and the people that have donated for that. At 11 o'clock, we're going to have a dedication for a World War II memorial for the Pacific, for people in Southern Utah that served in the Pacific for World War II. We've got a young Eagle Scout, Parker Norman, that's just sent me the proof for the stone. We did one earlier this year for the European monument that we did. So this will be for the Pacific, and we'll do that at 11 o'clock on December 18th. And I saw the proof of it today. It's a beautiful monument. And if you have a chance, come out that day for both those events. BMX Canyon View parking lot, we're going to put those out to bid in January. I talked with an engineer, and he said, Jarrett, and he said that would be ready for bid. The county already asked us to send them a bill for the county side of it, so they should be sending us a check. So we should have the money in the fund to, when we start that, to pay for the county's part of it. So also getting some bids for the budget for next year and this year to increase the fence at Spence Gun. We want to raise a perimeter fence up to 10 foot on the outfield. That way the BMX track, when they're having races and they're playing it at Spence Gun, we want to try to reduce the number of the balls that are being hit over the fence into the BMX track. So it'll be a 10-foot fence on the outside perimeter. And also while we're at it, we're getting bids for Little League backstop and raising the fences down there to 6 feet. So all those things are in the work. Really proud of the sports field, Brian and Dane and the sports field guys have been doing a really good job. Also wanted to tell you that I know Councilman Mathis has worked as part of the group on this, but we finished the trail. It's completely done between Old Farm Road and Graff Park and the bridge, and it's immaculately groomed. I mean, it's beautiful. So if you get a chance, go down there and hike that before we get the rains or the floods come through. It's groomed, it's perfect, it's beautiful down there. Just take an evening, go down there for about 30 minutes. We actually, over across from Ben's Farm at Old Farm Road, we actually took the trail and cut the fence down. We left the fence up. We took the fence down. We actually built the trail up over that riprap wall down into the bottom. So you can walk right over that riprap down into the bottom and connect with the trail down below. So we can get a four-wheeler in there or a mini X and things like that and maintain the trail and spray the invasive species that are down there. We've got a rundo and tamarisk and other things. So we can actually take care of that now and get in there with small equipment. So anyway, I'm really proud that we've had Lena Mathis and her group. We've had a group out of Las Vegas come in from a church in Las Vegas. We've had 5 college classes from DSU come out and work on that. So it's been quite a project, but it's beautiful. So please invite you to go down and look at that if you have the opportunity. Anyway, I appreciate having the council and having such support, and our people appreciate what you do, and they're thankful to work for Santa Clara. Anyway, that's all I have.
Bradley, is there anything going on the South Hills Pioneer Park or whatever that is? The Adventure Park?
I met with Sunrise. I had an agreement with the parks designer to help us take the conceptual to the next level, and I haven't got any response. So I met with Marv retired, so I met with, his last name's Phillips. I apologize. I can't remember his first name. Joe. Yeah, Joe Phillips. I met with him last week to find out what's going on because I haven't really heard anything. And also that a little bit concerned about the shooting in the South Hills, and we had talked about maybe a shooting ordinance, and I'm just wondering if there's anything that I can do to help the council, if you want to bring that forward, or if you just want to put it on hold, or what you want to do with the shooting ordinance.
Isn't the ordinance already in place? All we have to do is give the order to enforce it. There's no shooting allowed in the city limits by ordinance now, I thought.
We brought a draft ordinance for the city council to look at. Matt had drafted it, but I don't believe we've ever brought it to council for approval.
I was thinking we were running over underneath the state, which was just within 600 feet of a structure.
Right, that's where we're currently at. We're in the state statute, what Brock said.
Let's bring it back, put it on an agenda.
Have you heard anything back on the de-annexing?
Nope. Crickets.
Do we have to have approval to do it, or can we just vote to do it?
Yeah, there's a process to do it,
Okay.
but I kind of floated it, and that's about what I got. We'll see. Maybe if we move a little, if we start enforcing, maybe something will happen. I doubt it. They got their heads other places. It's about the last place in the county they will want to show up. Questions for Brad?
I did get a complaint about the restrooms in Little League fields, the lower restrooms. Is that in our facilities plan to ever upgrade or refurbish or anything like that? I haven't been in them, so I don't know. I just heard that they aren't the nicest.
We normally keep them locked unless they're in tournaments, and they're very small, very limited on space. There's 2 stalls in the women's side and there's only 1 in the men's. So if there's any issues in there where, a toilet gets clogged or anything like that, and, there's only 1 urinal in the boys and 1, toilet in there. So with the tournament and you get a lot of people in there, that's a lot of use for a small facility. And it's hard to keep up on, you know. Do you know specifically what the complaint was? Was it dirty or just not big enough or old or?
Yeah, just old and not nice, not very nice. That's what they said.
You raised the bar on all the other restrooms,
I think
Brad.
that might be the issue. Yeah. They're there a lot for their grandkids for ball games and said they just try to wait till they go home.
Brad, question. I know when, we'll call it phase 3 of the project was a new building down and it was maintenance. Were there bathrooms in that new building?
No, but we could add it in there. I mean, we could add bathrooms in that facility or we could take out the storage section that we currently have and increase the size in the existing building we have. And take out that middle maintenance storage room that the Little League and we share.
Yeah. So potential with phase 3 of whatever it's called, that's called project.
Thank you, sir. Chief?
Yeah, I've got a couple numbers you might be interested in. We had 120 calls last month. Our average response time was 8.61 minutes. I guess the majority of those calls were EMS calls, excluding vehicle accidents with injuries. That was 50% of our calls. So, and we're typically around 115, 120 calls a month. So in that range. I think I might have mentioned before that we have 4 personnel in an apparatus driver operator class. 3 of those happen to be females. So we're pretty excited about that. So that once they complete their testing and certification, that'll give us 4 more engineers, operators for driving our fire apparatus. So we're excited about that and pretty proud to have 3 females in that class. So that's exciting. They're doing well. They'll be testing here in the next week. So as far as wildland goes, I got a letter from Senator Lee's office thanking our city and our fire department for being part of the wildland program this past season and for our help throughout the state. Our wildland guys finished up their last day today, so they're done for the season. I talked to several of those guys, and I think most of them are planning on coming back next year. They really had a good season, and we're looking forward to having some of those guys back again. Let's see what else. We're still doing a lot of annual fire inspections, inspections for new businesses. So that's keeping us pretty busy. And we're still waiting to get the chassis for our wildland replacement engine. So I anticipate that'll be sometime next year before we see that. And hopefully we'll get it before the end of next year. So yeah, any questions for me?
How's that approach working out on Rachel Drive Station?
It's good. It's much better. We appreciate that. Good work, good suggestion, and it's done a lot better. We haven't broken any engines since then. So
Thanks, Chief. Dustin?
The Public Works Department started the storm drain down on the west end of Arrowhead Trail. They're about 2/3 of the way through the project. Hasn't been easy, lots of existing utilities in the way, but they're getting it in. They're doing a great job. And, I want to compliment them that they're able to go out and do a project like that, but yet keep up with everything else. Meter installation, blue stakes, water leaks. Casey's done a great job since he took the crew over. Hasn't missed a beat, and I'm really grateful for them. Jared, you asked last time about the customer portal for residents to be able to look at their water and electrical usage. That would be about $26,000 out of pocket with a reoccurring yearly charge for software upgrades for $12,500. So if that's something you guys would like to consider, I could bring it to the budget retreat and we could look at it then. It wouldn't be in the budget for this year. We can look at it then if you're interested in that. I presented a concept plan today to the MPO for Western Corridor Environmental and Design and got some good feedback from them. And that should be looked at by December 1st and see if we, if the board decides to move forward with that.
Are they going to send it to the tech,
Yeah.
to the executive committee?
Yeah. Once it goes through our committee over there, then it will.
Okay. I just need to know when to rally the troops.
What's that?
So probably the December meeting is when I'll rally the troops.
Yeah. And that's about all I have. Have anything for me?
This Arrowhead project's a good training for you guys for Vineyard coming up.
It's getting them broke in. It'll be good.
It's coming.
All right. Like to kind of echo what Dustin said. Our crews have been working really hard, and I really appreciate all him. And Eric has done an amazing job. I haven't had a lot of time to spend with him doing any other training, but he's taking the bull by the horns, just taking the crew and doing a great job with the small crew that we have. And they also really appreciate the backing of the council and mayor and Brock and staff. They're really appreciative of everything they have. And so from there, they completed the biannual maintenance up at the Vale plant a couple weeks ago. Everything went pretty smooth there. They removed the radiator from our engine number 2 and the gen end from engine number 1, and they've both been delivered to the respective shops to get repaired. We should have those back online, like I said, the first of the year. I don't know if you're aware, Mark Marshall has turned in his resignation due to personal reasons. So we're looking to hire another full-time lineman, a journeyman lineman. This week has been the hotline school. The IPSA puts on the hotline school. It's a week-long, scout camp for linemen. They go and do different tasks and learn different techniques on how to work on power lines. And they also have a rodeo, a competition. And Thomas, our apprentice, he joined up with a couple of the guys from Hurricane City, a couple of their apprentices, and competed. And they were really close to winning one event, but they put something on upside down, and they're in such a hurry. But he's doing really good. Thomas is a great apprentice. He's a good hard worker. But anyway, they did a good job representing Santa Clara.
Was this the thing that was at the Sun Bowl?
Yes.
Oh, I
Yep.
wondered what
Monday.
that
Monday was the rodeo.
Okay.
Let's see. We've received the quotes for the substation upgrade for the Hassel substation. We should be awarding that here by the end of the week, probably tomorrow or maybe Monday. So we can get going on that project, and also the SCADA. At UAMPS, they mentioned the EV charging stations, that we can get a grant through the Department of Environmental Quality. They will do a 50% cost share on if we want to put EV charging stations around Santa Clara. We talked about a little bit with Brock and with Jim, and me and Jim are going to meet tomorrow and discuss it a little bit more. I don't know if that's something that council would like to see go into the city. They had about $5 million to divvy out, and they're down to about just over 2 million is all they have left. So I think it might be a good idea to put him in our city and offer that to.
Where would you think would be the best locations?
Right now, we're gonna go talk to Harmon's and see if, I know Harmon's is actually doing it themselves, putting it in some of their locations. So I don't know, maybe we can do kind of a partnership with Harmon's and see about putting it in there. We also talked about Googler Park. maybe. It might be a good place for them at the Goobler Park. What other areas was it, Brock, we talked about?
I think those were the the main ones I can remember was Google Park in there with the new Pad A coming in, Beans and Brew, and right across from there, they have that plant strip that's out in front, and thought maybe that might be a good spot to put some in right there. So
How much do they cost?
I'm not for sure yet. I just had a meeting today with Hunt Electric, and they've got a department that's just on renewable sources. So they actually just did a ribbon cutting for Dixie Power today for some that they put in. And I talked to them a little bit about it, and he's going to get me some information tomorrow before my meeting with Jim, so we can kind of go over the cost. And so that right now I'm not for sure, but there's revenue available for it as well. There's really no state regulation on how much you can charge. So we could charge pretty much whatever we wanted, I guess, but we'd want to make it so we don't want to gouge them, but we can charge enough to cover the cost of the energy and then some.
the other spot we talked about was the west side of Dutchman's, and where they kind of have stacked their concrete pumpers and stuff. We talked a little bit on that west side.
Yeah.
I think Nick's got building plans over there, but it wouldn't hurt to talk to somebody down on this end, even maybe Austin Anderson on that piece next to the Mexican restaurant.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to, I mean, could you do something on the city side here, like out on the road? I mean, is that just a bad spot for it?
I don't know if you could do it on the highway, but you'd want them someplace where the people have something to do while they're waiting their 30 or 40 minutes to charge.
Yeah, there's different stations. You can get one. There's just a level. I think it's level 1, and that's like a slow trickle charge, like you would have at your house overnight. And there's one in the middle that might take an hour or two to charge a car fully. And then there's a level 3, which in I think they said a half an hour to an hour, it would charge a car completely empty to full. But it's the price cost. So depending on where you put them, and like if you put them at Harmon's, you might would most likely probably go with a level 2 or maybe a level 3 in areas like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I used one up in Park City when I went up there recently. They had it at their rec center, and there was no charge. It was just use it. So,
oh really?
Yeah, I thanked Park City as I drove out of town. As they charged my car. I know the ones over at the Walmart, there's never a car plugged in there. It's really weird. So that'd be something to probably ask Harmon's how it's doing in their other facilities if it's actually getting used. And I think part of it is just that, do I have to set up an account? How hard is it to get my bill? And who do I actually call if it doesn't work? It's kind of a big pain sometimes. So that'd be something to look at.
Yeah, well, there's different, I guess you'd call them vendors. I can't remember the one that he mentioned, but they have their own infrastructure as far as billing. So there's, I don't know how many options there are out there, but the one that they mentioned that the Hunt Electric goes mainly through is, I can't remember.
ChargePoint, maybe?
ChargePoint, yeah.
That's the most common one.
Yeah. And then it's an app. You get an app on your phone or however you set up your payment, either Apple or Pay or credit card, whatever.
Jared, have you ever used the ones by First Watch and Starbucks there at Sunset Corner?
No, so that's a Tesla charger.
Is it just Tesla only?
Just Tesla. Okay. Yeah. I've used the one out at the Maverick in Washington. That's how I got a ChargePoint account, but it was so expensive that I would never use it again.
Yeah.
So that's something you have to kind of balance of what's it worth to people. But I would think, yeah, ballparks where they're going to a game, they travel from a ways. I could see them sitting there for a while charging.
Yeah, that's why we were thinking Goobler Park might be a good area for one, and as well as Harmon's.
Yeah.
Do you think that like those Tesla only charge that Tesla comes in and puts those in, or somebody there says, hey,
Tesla?
It's Tesla
Is it?
does it. Yeah. And yeah, we're just kind
You
of
gotta
at the
spend
cusp.
$6 for a coffee just to plug your car in.
yeah,
So if that's something that you'd like to look at, we'll investigate it further and get you some more information. Yeah, they will match up to 50%.
Yeah, if you could talk to Harmon's maybe and see how it's gone in their other areas, that'd be really good to know.
Okay. The Brian Black from UAMPS was talking about it, and he said there might be an additional grant through the federal government for an additional 25%. So I will look into that and see what's available. My last item is UAMPS will not be charging us for the lost revenue from buying from the PX. They will absorb that. So
what does PX
What does that mean?
The power exchange where certain utilities were getting on the power.
Dollar sign. What does that mean? Is that like $8 they're not going to charge us for, or 80?
They're not going to charge us anything. Well,
for what? I mean, give me a range. What does that mean?
I don't know what our cost would have been.
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands?
Tens of thousands would have been to us. But no, maybe you want to explain it? You want?
Well, what was happening? There was some utilities that were getting on early in the morning, like 1 or 2 in the morning, and purchasing power for the day too far in advance. Well, like I said, they weren't breaking any rules or laws of UAMPS, but it was kind of a loophole. And by the time UAMPS got the power purchased for that day, the prices went up. So these 5 or 6 utilities were purchasing at a
discount,
$30, $40, $50 a megawatt, and then at the end of the day, it was costing $100 a megawatt. So UAMPS was losing that every hour.
Sure, you know.
Buying and selling short.
And it was UAMPS kind of took the responsibility of it, so they're deciding they're not going to penalize everybody for it, for a few that were taking advantage of that situation.
So do they have a mechanism in place to prevent that going forward?
Yes. Yeah, they're rewriting their policies and changing the way they're operating the power exchange.
Yeah, no written rules broken, just maybe ethically.
Yeah.
You know, to everybody that's part of UAMPS. Hey.
Well, that was Jared's question earlier is there, we put this in, is there somebody that's gonna take the whipping if they screw up?
So
sounds like UAMPS is taking this one. So.
What was the total dollar amount? It was in the millions, right?
About $2.4 million.
UAMPS is eating the whole thing.
Yeah.
What you say UAMPS is eating? That's
it's us.
We're just not coming out of pocket, but that's us.
Oh, okay.
We're just not
But we're a little player in the.
Yeah, that's why I said we're in the tens of thousands low end versus, but it's us because we're a member of UAMPS. We're just not asked to.
Hopefully it was some of them bigger members that are eating part of what they did.
Whatever percentage we have in UAMPS, I guess I don't know how they're gonna. It just comes out of their reserves. At least we won't get stuck with a $10,000 or $20,000 bill. So that's all I have. Any questions for me?
You should have started with that one. That was kind of a. Yeah, you had everything great, and then that one, geez, lead off with that.
I thought that was good news. We're not getting a bill. Any questions for me?
You're going to text me when the lights get here, right?
They said the 7th, so I'm hoping next week they show up and we're gonna light that tree up.
Right. Everyone get Plan B, just in case. Yeah.
Burning tree. It's kind of a neat thing.
Ace has lights in.
They did get lights in.
I looked the other day.
Okay, Cody, you're up.
All right. Regretfully, the building department doesn't have any strong accolades like Brad, his thank you card, Randy, letter from the senator, Justin, infrastructure project. Here's Gary. Now he's getting $2.4 million back. That's not us. The best Fred and I get is hey, Fred, you're doing a good job. And he says, hey, Cody, you're doing a good job. So we keep that between ourselves. Anyway,
You say it to each other though.
Yes, it's back and forth. When we hear all this other stuff going on in the office, we have to. Scott isn't with us. Scott's on vacation. And so I'll cover his report. Home permits for the fiscal year 2021 through 22. Fiscal year 2021 through 2022, we're at 49. New home permit plan reviews that are in process, we're at 16. Various permits, accessory buildings, awnings, swimming pools. We're at 11 for the month of October. Various other permit review processes, we're at 7. Solar permits, 1. That's slow. I imagine that may pick up with everything that's going on. There are currently 360 active building permits in Santa Clara City. And in October, from the 1st to the 31st, there were 269 building inspections and stormwater inspections conducted. So I ran into Ben and he says, "Hey, are you guys looking for things to do?" And I said, "No, we're not. We're staying steady." Planning and zoning, I'll let Jim touch on that. Code enforcement, Scott's been touching a few items. Looks like has 15 work order entries, one nuisance court case, a dam inspection, not a dam inspection, but a dam inspection, 4 city facility inspections, 9 stormwater subdivision inspections, 1 notice of intent received, and a news article written. So that I'll really give him a pat on the back for the news article. And then building maintenance. My first meeting, I guess the geothermal pump was noisy, and that was switched out on the building maintenance side.
Quiet.
There it goes. And you don't even
On
hear it.
cue.
You don't even hear it. We go over that wall stuff. Sure, let's cue it up. We only took 20 minutes.
That's why I literally just, hey, what's for dinner?
Yeah. I didn't realize that. Wait, gave me this and I can throw some stuff out, but in October, we did have a planning commission meeting. We had the 4 items that we brought to you last week, including the 2 plat amendments, subdivision, and the code amendments for IADUs. So that was done. Next week, we have a planning commission meeting on the 9th instead of the 11th because the 11th is Veterans Day. We're going to be having, speaking of fences and walls and discussions, that's the discussion that we're going to have with the planning commission next week for that particular item. So we can move forward with going to perhaps a public hearing with the planning commission in December and coming back to the council after that to make some amendments to the fence and wall ordinance. I mean, there are other things going on, but that's what we have right now. I had a meeting with Matt Entz today. I meet weekly with Matt and Brock and Scott, and we had Cody join us today, but we talked about a whole bunch of issues, one of which we talked about today about the ADU, bringing the ADU changes back that were discussed last week. That may come to you in December as well. If we can get it, I think we can get it on the December agenda with PC and get that taken care of because it's more cleanup and then bring it back to you. And we can have a fee discussion about rental. We talked about that as well, cleaning that up when we come back to charge the business license or the yearly rental fee for an ADU and IADU and rentals kind of across the board. That's all that's coming to mind right now. There's a lot going on. I'm meeting with people daily, taking phone calls, and helping people out. I did hear the individual that owns Quench called yesterday, and she's hoping to get that open real soon. I drove by the building. It doesn't look quite as done as she thought it was, but I guess she's coming tomorrow or Friday to take a look at that. But I know Quench is looking to come soon. And of course, we just, Mobetta, which is great, and Swig, the competitor. It's interesting how when you have competitors, it makes it even better. Like you put 2 burger places next to each other, and when one is crowded, they just go to the other one, right? So the competitor's right across the street. So I think we're doing good, and I think there's some good things coming in, and it's exciting. Cody mentioned Beans and Brews. I mean, they do bang up business. I mean, it wraps around in Roxbury. So all of these are good things coming in. Doesn't matter that it's $6 or $7 a coffee or a drink. People will pay it. They pay for that rather than lunch. They'd rather have a beverage. So it's a good thing. That's all I have.
Questions for Jim or Cody?
I have a couple. One question, can you just check and make sure that all the planning commissioners have met their education requirement for the year so we don't run into a problem?
That's a great question. The 2 hours of training. So
Yeah.
I'll check on that tomorrow
Okay.
with Selena and see where we're at.
And then my second question, I know that Mobetta's just barely opened, but have we had any concerns or complaints called in regarding the drive up? How the drive up was positioned? Because I
I
think it's a
haven't
little
heard any.
different than what.
So I don't know that it's been operating long enough to get the complaints yet. Though the way Swig is doing theirs, I mean, you see their menu, but you don't order there. You drive up and then you stop and you order with somebody that comes out and takes your order.
Right.
I think that's actually probably going to help that because then you have that stop right there to turn and go down to their window.
Yeah, my
But-
concern is the exiting part. Because it doesn't, I thought when we approved it, they were crossing in the mid, like crossing, but they don't cross. It's Mobetta stops and then the people going to Swig actually have to wait for them to go through and then they can turn.
Yeah, at the very end,
Yeah,
where roughly where Swig's taking their orders, the Swig people have to make like a hard left turn to get to their window.
right,
Mobetta's will go a little bit more straighter than turn out.
right.
But we'll find out. I'm taking a look at it
I just
tomorrow.
wonder, I know they haven't been open for very
Yeah.
long, but I've been there actually when I've been the car here and there's a car here
Okay.
and it's a little dicey.
I totally agree. I think
With the Swig, it's interesting because I've seen all different examples with Swig. They do bang up business, people. I just take mine, like I was saying, I just take mine straight 99 cents at Maverick for a drink, right? Rather than the flavored sodas, I just go and get a big gulp.
I'll get you a gift card so you can test
Okay,
it out.
okay. I have. And that's part of my experience. So my daughter, I have one daughter and before she went to Utah State for her freshman year, she spent a summer working at the Swig in Draper on 123rd South. And that place is busy and they're all busy. I mean, when it gets really busy, cars can go all the way to the main road. It wraps around. And that one actually has a second access where you can cut the line. And she said that summer there were so many Draper moms, as she referred to them, that would cut each other off or beat each other to the pass to get the drink. So many arguments. But they actually have the board and they have people come to you to take your order and call it in. And that's what I saw yesterday. I was over at Swig yesterday because the competitor Quench was calling me and talking to me about her menu board and what she wants to do. So I was making comparison in size to the one at Mobetta and Swig, which are both 6x4. One's up and down, one's side by side. So I'm going to encourage her to do something similar, not some big, huge thing that's not needed or necessary. But I did see that people were coming and they would go around the side and the individuals outside calling the orders in. And I saw the same thing. But then there was one in Murray off of either 7th East or 9th East by 7-Eleven under an old billboard. And they had problems with them because the traffic was stacking into the right of way into UDOT's road on 7th East. That's not the case here. I don't think this design's much better and the queuing's much better, but if you don't think these things out, that's what can happen. So what I see is queuing's been thought out, double drive-through. We know that Chick-fil-A and McDonald's are all over that, right? And then who can order first and cut the other one off. So kind of is what it is, but I think we're going to get really good business there.
Any other questions, council? Thank you, guys. I appreciate all the staff, the good work that you do. November 9th, everybody should have got the email on the water summit. Is everybody going?
I am, yeah.
Then we need to notice the meeting. Because they're going to ask us questions that we'll have to respond to. So I need you to notice a special city council meeting for and the county doesn't want it noticed until the 8th. If you call Eric Clark, he'll send you the language.
Chris, you got that?
Well, they don't-
Eric Clark,
That
is he
just
with the
people don't
county?
show up?
He's a county.
I have no idea. I just passing the word along. But if we're gonna have a quorum present, they're gonna ask us questions. We just need to notice the meeting.
That's a Monday, Tuesday.
Tuesday
That's
night.
Tuesday, and I think it's
at the
5:30.
5:30 at the Dixie.
5:30 at the Dixie Center.
But we're planning to have everybody there.
Yeah, I'll be there.
All right.
So let's notice the meeting, and then if we need to quorum,
Special
we
meeting on
can.
Monday.
We'll all be there.
We'll notice it on
Maybe we
Monday.
can get Mobetta's right before, have it
Just with
delivered.
Or after.
Or
We have
after.
to notice it as a special meeting because all the council's gonna be there and they're gonna ask questions, so we have to notice it as a special meeting on Tuesday,
Okay. Okay.
Tuesday the 9th at 5:30. So we'll do it on Monday. We can call Eric Clark at the county. He'll give us the language for it.
They're not noticing.
Okay.
The day,
Anything else, council? Time's up.
24 hours.
We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Oh, I didn't ask you. Did you have anything?
That's right. Don't forget to RSVP for the Christmas party, December 2nd.
There you go. Good answer. Anything else?
Well, you're
Elect-
15 minutes from my bedtime.
We're already adjourned.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
Elections will
exceeded
come next
my
week for canvas.
Expectation, but.
Congratulate Ben.
Congratulations, Ben.
On the list.
But I